Hello and welcome to James Bond Radio, episode number 39, our review of the Kingsley Amis / Robert Markham novel, Colonel Sun. My name's Tom Sears and I'm joined by my good buddy who's wearing an excellent t-shirt today, I might add, Mr. Chris Wright. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
How you doing today, buddy?
I'm all right. I'm rocking the JBR t-shirt. It's giving me excited vibes for today.
Absolutely. I wore my JBR t-shirt to the cinema the other day. I went to see Mad Max, which was good.
I'm watching that in about 2 days' time.
It's a good one. It's fun.
Good?
Yeah. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it, actually. But
I've heard a lot of positive responses from people, so it's going to be a bit crazy, but I guess that's in the title, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's definitely on the crazy side, but definitely worth a watch anyway. I wore my JBR t-shirt to the cinema, flying the flag. Sadly, no one recognised me. I was expecting at least a few people to recognise me, but it didn't happen, sadly. You know,
what's going on?
I might just start wearing it all the time. And just, hopefully that will happen. Make me feel famous.
The fact that it was in a dark room and their eyes were probably on the screen, probably.
Yeah, maybe that was it. Yeah, maybe that was it. But there we go. So it's Colonel Sunday. What do you think about that?
It is. Colonel Sunday. I'm pretty excited because, I've read most of the Fleming books, quite a few of the continuation books as well. But I hadn't read Colonel Sun. So for me, this was a whole new experience. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, we'll go into that a bit more. But it's good to obviously come across a fresh bit of Bond material, I guess. So, but you'd read it before, hadn't you?
Yeah, I read it. Look, I remember stumbling across an old sort of vintage paperback copy in an old secondhand bookshop on the Isle of Wight years ago when I was probably about 12, maybe 13 tops. And I read it then and I remember really loving it. And then I hadn't read it since then. So I had vague memories of like some bits and bobs, like the setting and Greece and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't remember a lot of the story. So it was it was pretty fresh for me as well, which is exciting. So let's before we get into the actual meat of the review, let's talk about some other stuff. So we've been getting tons of feedback on the Bond questions of the day on Facebook, which is pretty nice. Yeah. If you're not on the Facebook page, we've been posting, and Twitter, a Bond question of the day, everything from like who's your favorite Bond to what's your favorite Bond poster or what's your favorite title sequence, and there's been some really good feedback from everybody. Everybody seems to kind of get on board with those, don't they?
Yeah, we've had a lot. I mean, every single post we're getting a lot of hits on it in terms of people's, and it's good because there's a little bit of debate as well. Most, some of the questions, everyone's similar answers. Some of them, we're getting people who are like, "How can you say that? This is the best," or whatever. But it's quite good because it's getting the old banter going. Which is quite interesting to see. Definitely, absolutely,
yeah,
good fun.
It's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting to the point now where it's kind of like how many Bond we're going to have to get like quite obscure with the questions, isn't it? It's like, what's your favorite pair of Bond shoes? But all good fun nonetheless. Yeah. So we had a little message from JBR listener John Daniels, didn't we? Who was in Panama City of all places.
That's right. So he was basically doing a bit of James Bond location viewing, which is pretty cool because it's one of our favourite pastimes as well. So he was in Panama City visiting a location from Quantum of Solace. In the film, it was doubling for Bolivia, but he visited a place called the Institute of Culture, and that was the Grand Andean Hotel in Bolivia in the film. So from the exterior, I think it's kind of like a big square white building, but it looks good. It's you'd recognise the hotel from the outside anyway. So yeah. Did
he perhaps go in and pretend he was a teacher who'd won the lottery?
Well, I certainly would have done. On sabbatical, just see for the reaction. I hope he did, and if you didn't, John, then next time you go to Panama, that's your mission.
Absolutely, good stuff. Yeah. I suppose we should mention that we're a week late with this episode, shouldn't we? Because obviously I put a little message out on iTunes so people knew what was going on, but we had a little bit of a hoo-ha with the technology last time, didn't we?
This is a take two.
Yeah, so this is version 2 from scratch. Yeah. So thanks for your patience in waiting an extra week. In other news, we had a message from JBR listener John Ward, who has gone and got a SPECTRE SPECTRE logo tattoo on his forearm, which is a very brave move, isn't it? And he's got like the old, it's not the new one, it's like the old school kind of like From Russia with Love looking octopus.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, he actually Facebooked us this morning, and I'm just going to get that message up because he's only going to take it a step further, which I really appreciated. And he's gone and written a letter to Barbara Broccoli of all people, and I'm curious to see whether he gets more of a response than you did with your Quantum of Solace complaint. Let me see.
I don't think it could be any worse.
No. So here we go. So John Ward, here we go. So he sent us a photo of the tattoo through, which I'll get his permission, see if we can post it on the page for everyone to look at on Facebook. He says, guys, I decided to try and cash in on the tattoo. You guys will hopefully appreciate this level of geekery. Dear Mrs. Broccoli, I'm writing to request an invitation to the premiere of SPECTRE later this year. Very nice, just coming straight out with it. I like it.
Yeah, why not?
I appreciate this is an audacious request, but I have excellent grounds for such an inquiry, as last week I became the proud owner of a SPECTRE tattoo. After years of dithering over a design, I finally settled on this fantastic, timeless piece of artwork. I enclose a photograph showing the finished article. Why do I make this request? Number 1, it took ages. Number 2, it really hurt. And number 3, it looks really cool. Go on, admit it. And then number 4, I am now a walking advert for the new film. Seriously, it would be a fantastic privilege to attend the event, and I promise that my right arm will be kept fully covered at all times. I have sent a copy of this letter to the representatives of 2 of your colleagues, Mr. Craig and Mendez, in the hope that one of you will lend me a sympathetic ear to this request. If I don't go, it will be a night in watching Never Say Never Again. Don't make me do it, Barbara. Don't make me do it. Yours in anticipation, John Ward. What do you think about that?
I like it. I think it's great. I like he went for the Never Say Never Again angle because obviously Eon famous for not wanting that to be spread around. So yeah, I think it's a good request. Why not? Let's go. And the picture is great. The tattoo is great, isn't it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a brave move and a good one. It kind of reminds me a little bit, though it's on the other side of his arm, of the Tong sign from Thunderball, the little kind of tattoo.
That's right.
So maybe
Count Lippy.
Yeah, so maybe we should have a little JBR club where we all have a secret SPECTRE tattoo on our bodies somewhere, and that will be the way we identify each other, aside from the T-shirt, obviously.
So yeah, exactly, yeah.
So
where would we put it though? That's it. Maybe behind the ear, some sort of discreet place like that, perhaps.
Behind the ear, that would be a good one. Yeah, that would be a good one. Yeah, I'll leave that to you first, Chris. You can do that one first, and I'll follow.
It'll be a challenge to try and find your fellow JBR, though, wouldn't it? Be like, let me just inspect behind your ear.
Indeed. Cool. So we also had some candid pics from somebody. I'm going to let you take the reins on this one because I have no idea how to say this poor fella's name.
So this is a Mr. Bob Gyogigan, which is not the right way of pronouncing it. I think it's Bob
Gyogigan. It's spelled Geoghegan. Gyogan. It could be one of those Celtic ones, so it's like Gyogan or something like that. I don't know.
Or Gyoan, maybe.
Georgi.
Yeah, something like Yeah, Georgie. Either which way, it's a cool surname, and we like it. So Bob had kindly added a link with some nice candid photos. Now these are from Dr. No all the way through to Skyfall. Some of them I'm imagining most people have seen. There's quite a few which have been doing the rounds, but there are one or two in there which I definitely hadn't seen, and that's what I like to see. Is you like to hear about behind the scenes stuff, but it's also nice to see the Bond actors smiling, having a joke, just off camera, just playing around, and that shows that that's a happy set. A happy set is a good film, I think.
Absolutely,
and a lot of these candid photos sort of show that. So cheers for that, Bob. That was great. Good
stuff. And we also heard from JBR listener Stephen Bain, who was I couldn't possibly comment on the gentlemanliness of where he'd been, but tell me the story. Where's he been?
So I think he was either on a stag do or meeting up with friends. But he ended up at a lovely gentleman's club called For Your Eyes Only, of all things.
Very nice.
Which I think is a brilliant name, and there's also happens to be one in Cardiff. So it must be a sort of a chain of them around the UK, I'd imagine.
Do you think that Stephen's just regular place he goes to on a Friday night after work, do you think, or do you think it was a stag do?
Well, apparently all of his friends were obviously looking at everything that was inside, whereas Stephen said his eyes were on the sign the whole time and nothing else. So I'm not sure. What do you think?
I suppose we should be clear, because I don't know whether they call them a gentleman's club is basically a strip club, isn't it? I don't know whether they call them that everywhere in the world, because they might be thinking he's at Blades or somewhere. But basically a titty club. You're going to go to have a look at some titties, and it's cool for your eyes only. And there's one in Southampton actually that I pass through all the time, but I've never been in. Never been in, but I've been past it, and I always look at it and think, oh, I should visit there sometime.
Maybe if you walk past with your JBR t-shirt, they might sort of, oh, there we go.
Invite me in. Give me a free lappy. Lovely.
Lovely jubbly. So hopefully, we haven't actually heard what happened in the end, but hopefully Stephen had a good night. I'm sure he did.
Yeah, an expensive one nonetheless.
An expensive one, yeah, definitely. Obviously we're on the subject of books today, and I recently finished Sid Kane's book, which is Not Forgetting James Bond. No, this one's been out for a while. I think it's probably about 10 years old, or maybe even a little bit older. It's about 10, 11 years old, but I hadn't read it before, and it's really good. So Sid Kane was a production designer and art director on quite a few of the Bonds. Dr. No, who's on, I think he's most famous for On Her Majesty's, production designer. The front cover is him with a model of Peace Gloria, and he designed Blofeld's coat of arms and did all that. But he was right up there in terms of production design. And the good thing about these biographies is they tell you all about everyone leading up to their time on Bond, and obviously beyond Bond, but there's nice little nuggets from when he was working on Bond, so it's worth a read.
Definitely worth a read. Speaking of Majesties, I've seen on Facebook this morning a friend of JBR, David Zaritsky from the Bond Experience. He was actually at Pete's Gloria very recently, within the last couple of days, and he's been uploading all his photos. There's a picture of him on that bit, the bit where George makes the phone call and then they shoot and he runs along the top by that kind of banister thing. There's a picture of him holding onto that banister. He's up at Pete's Gloria. He's in the bobsleigh holding a gun and all that kind of stuff. So you've got to follow the Bond Experience on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. He's on as well to see some of those pictures. So it's he's on his trip right now, like he mentioned on the podcast a few weeks back.
Nice. But, we'll have to make a trip out there at some point. Hey,
definitely. We've had some very kind donations from the listeners for your kind of charity run / climb -- crazy marathon, haven't we?
We have indeed, yeah. I just wanted to do a quick shout out of thanks to everyone that's sponsored me so far. So basically, I'm doing a challenge in June, which is like climbing sort of 3 mountains in Wales, which we have to do in 15 hours, including sort of travelling in between. So it's quite a tough one. Then in July, I'm doing an ultra marathon in the Lake District, which is like 50 miles over and up and down sort of rugged hills, as it were. And the first one's for T Haven, which is helping children with sort of life-limiting disabilities. And the ultra marathon is for prostate cancer. So they're both for brilliant causes. And I just want to say a big thanks to everyone that's helped me out so far.
Very nice. The JBR Army stepping up and contributing to a good cause. So thank you for that. If you haven't yet and you still want to sponsor Chris, if you go to jamesbondradio.com and look at the latest This Week in James Bond blog post rather, by Linda Zhu, there's a little link at the bottom which you can click and you can sponsor Chris. So that's all good, all for a good cause. Lovely stuff. Will you be doing the run sort of dressed up as James Bond or a pony or a pantomime horse or something like that, or not?
Well, I did sort of mention last time, if I manage to hit my target for the 3 peaks, I will wear a bow tie and I will rehydrate myself with a water pistol and obviously get photos of me doing so. So
I think the water pistol should either be spray painted gold or be as close to a Walther PPK as you could possibly get.
I was hoping for a Walther, but if not, then spray painted gold.
Very nice, cool stuff.
Sounds good.
So before we roll the theme tune and get cracking, make sure you come and join us on Facebook. Just put James Bond Radio into the search. Come and follow us on Twitter, which is at James Bond Radio. That way you can engage in the Bond questions of the day shenanigans we're having. Much conversation to be had there. Also come to jamesbondradio.com and get involved in the comments section of the website. Every blog post, every podcast post on there has got some good conversation and comments going. And of course we have the weekly This Week in James Bond feature by Linda Zhu over in Station C, Canada. And also, last but not least, come and give us an iTunes review, a glowing 5-star one, all in capital letters, preferably. because that helps us kind of get up there on the iTunes charts. And also, if you haven't, subscribe on iTunes too, because what happens is when everybody subscribes and the episode gets downloaded immediately, it becomes available. Then what happens is with all those people downloading all at the same time, we get a little boost up the chart. So it really helps us if you actually subscribe as well. And of course, you never miss an episode. And second, lastly, but not leastly, is you can come to jamesbondradio.com and leave us a voicemail, whether that's a quote, a question, a piece of trivia, or just wanted to say hi. You can do that through your computer over there. So there's a little button on the right-hand side that says leave us a voicemail, and you can get in touch, and we'll probably play it on the show at some point. Lovely stuff. Now, I got a little surprise for you this week, Chris, which you didn't know about.
Ooh,
but
I like surprises.
Yeah, I've finally decided that today should be the day we do the fully naked James Bond podcast. So I hope you're up for that. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Not really.
All right. Okay.
You were a little bit too eager on that one, but no, I've kind of made a few additions, some subtle additions, and remixed the James Bond Radio theme tune. Da-na!
Wow!
So
have you?
see if you
forward to this.
see if you can spot the difference. So here we go.
Okay.
Let's roll the theme tune.
Who are you?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James. Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British hand up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
Pussy. As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Well, I must say, Mr. Tom Sears, that was very, very nice to listen to. That was a good surprise, actually. I liked the little xylophone was kind of like a nice little link to the Spectre trailer.
There you go.
Was that where you were going with that?
I'm glad you spotted that, because that's what I was shooting for. So very nice. Little
Yeah.
bling, bling,
Excellent.
bling. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. Lovely. I like it.
Cool stuff. So we got some Bond news, haven't we?
We have indeed.
Kicking off with a somewhat a story that kind of it kind of pisses me off a little bit, Chris. I will be honest with you, but good old Roger has won some damages. There was a news story, I believe, in an Australian magazine, which the Daily Mail then retold and reposted on their website and stuff and printed, that Roger had been accused of being groped. Not being groped, the other way around. Oh, very nice. No, basically, that Roger had groped one of the actresses in For Your Eyes Only in an inappropriate manner. Basically, it was the girl in the flower shop that he kind of pushes past in For Your Eyes Only. Now, what kind of happened is that girl didn't even make any accusation at all, as far as I can tell. When they kind of found her to sort of interview her, she said, "No, Roger was lovely and I had a great time," and all that kind of stuff. And basically, this magazine just fabricated the whole thing that he'd been kind of like cracking onto her and feeling her boobies and all sorts of nasty stuff. So Roger kind of sued him, and obviously couldn't be proved, and it was all kind of thrown out of court. And Roger won some damages. So good on you, Roger. I hope you go and have a slap up dinner to celebrate that. And it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like they tried to screw him over with the whole Idris Elba thing a few weeks ago, didn't they?
What is it with? Just leave Sir Roger alone.
Yeah.
He's a lovely man.
Yeah.
Why do you get so many idiots out there? I don't.
I know, it's crazy.
It's just stupid, isn't it?
It's one of those things, isn't it, where it's like, let's try and sell a few papers at the expense of somebody else's reputation. And I've never ever in all my life heard a bad story about Roger Moore. He's always been like the pinnacle of being a proper gentleman and a good-hearted, kind soul, you know. And it's annoying. Like, at least pick on an arsehole if you're going to pick on somebody and make something up. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Don't pick on Roger.
Exactly. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, I don't know if this is putting us in deep water, so to speak, in case there are any tabloid people that do listen to this. But you got to imagine, not all tabloids now, but some of them, if you had to say what job, you know, is sort of the scum, you know, the scum that works for, what sort of job, you know, do the scum work for the most? Tabloid journalism's got to be up there, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think, obviously it depends what kind of paper you're talking about. But like, for example, weirdly, on an unrelated note, I was listening to Richard Branson's autobiography this week, and he was talking about when he launched Virgin Airways, and on the kind of the test flight, before any of the public was on there. He had like loads of the people that worked in the company on the plane. And as they took off, a bird was sucked into the engine, and the engine basically almost exploded, was in flames, and all the smoke coming out the back. And he said, like, there was a journalist sitting right next to him, and he was like, "Oh, fuck! Like, this is like, if once this hits the paper, like, this is over before it's even started." And he said afterwards, the journalist said to him, "Don't worry, I'm not from that sort of paper." Like, and all the pictures that he had of what had happened, he like handed over to Richard Branson, so it was never like publicized. And he was like so grateful because his whole company would have just folded on that news that the first flight had that happen. And I thought to myself, man, that's a really rare thing, isn't it? Like, you would imagine that journalist would have been like, "Oh, amazing scoop! I can sell some copies with this," and then they would go, you know. So I guess it totally depends on the kind of the classiness of the publication, doesn't it? But you know, the Daily Mail doesn't have the greatest reputation, does it, for sort of speaking the truth? It tends to be a bit of fear mongering, and B, a nice hefty load of bullshit as well sometimes. But there we go.
Yeah. There we go, indeed. But on to sort of brighter news, shall we say? Anthony Sinclair, the tailor who obviously fitted out Connery for the early Bonds, has just released the famous conduit suit. So the conduit cut suit, which is the one that actually Connery did wear in the early Bonds. Now it's available to order online. So this is their first ever ready-to-wear suit online. Now this suit is obviously, it's not going to be super cheap, but it's £750. But if you order one before the end of May, so there's not long left. But if you do, you get a £50 discount. You get a shirt, a knitted tie, and a pocket sort of cotton.
Pocket square.
In your chest, a pocket square, exactly. Yeah. So, if I had a spare 700, that's probably what it would go on.
Very nice. I think there's always been a dream of mine is to pop over to Anthony Sinclair and get a fitting and stuff. So this one's off the peg, isn't it? It's like it is. Yeah. So get measured just like Sean would have all those years ago, and have a proper Bond suit. But there we go.
You've got the tie already, haven't you?
I do. Yeah, I got the Anthony Sinclair tie for Christmas a few years ago, so I've already got that bit. Yeah. But even though at £700, that's significantly cheaper than the Tom Ford suit that Daniel would wear. So you know that's
2.5, 3K. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's a proper investment, that one. So if you've got a spare £700, get yourself down to Anthony Sinclair before the end of May, and get yourself a Connery suit. Lovely. Yeah. In other Bondian clothing related news, it's been revealed that Danny Boy is going to be wearing a cashmere N peel sweater, which if you're up on that kind of thing, you'll know that he wore a blue version under his Barber jacket in Skyfall. So that kind of jumper is coming back in Spectre, just in a different colour this time. So that's another.
He loves the cashmere, doesn't he?
He loves a bit of cashmere, does Daniel.
Have you ever had a cashmere top or jumper or anything like that? I don't think I have.
I don't think I have either, actually, off the top of my head. No. But yeah, I think Daniel is the first. Like, Bond has always been a well-dressed man, isn't he, throughout all the years? But I feel like Daniel, he sort of leans more. He likes a bit of knitwear, doesn't he? He's always rocked a cardigan, and he's got his cashmere jumpers on and stuff. So I think he'll be forever remembered as the woolen Bond. Don't you think?
Yeah, which is funny because Roger Moore used to be a model for knitwear before he was Bond. So
he did, didn't he? There's a link back there. Absolutely,
right. Yeah, there is indeed.
Yeah.
So there's another thing that I was looking into. I know there was a picture released, it was quite a while ago now, with Mr. Hinx. It was a first sort of still of Mr. Hinx where he's in the car, he's turning around, he's got that pistol in his hand, and we see it's a double-barrel pistol. Now, I'd never sort of seen anything quite like it before. I don't think you had.
No.
But I remember with the henchman episode, we were basically saying that all the classy henchmen have an added sort of gadget or that little something extra which they use, like Jaws' teeth, Odd Job's hat, Red Grant's watch, all these sort of things. And it looks like Hinx's could be this gun. Now, what did you think when you first saw it?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good choice because, like we said, it's like he's got to have a thing. Like when they did the casting call, it was like it's an iconic henchman in the same vein as a Jaws or an Odd Job. So it's kind of like he can't just be like a big muscly dude. He's got to have a thing, and it's it's very difficult to have a thing in this particular sort of incarnation of Bond without stepping into the cheese territory, isn't it?
It is very tricky.
And there's been so many things over the years that either have worked or haven't. Like, Odd Job's hat is great. That's iconic. George's teeth, iconic. And then you got the henchman like Stamper, for example, who, had different coloured eyes or whatever it was, and the whole pain thing that's just sort of fell a bit flat and didn't perhaps work. And so you've had a few of those. So it's difficult to find that thing. And I think if this is indeed his iconic little thing, I think it could work really well because it's something I've never seen before. I've never seen a double-barreled pistol. Certainly not in a film that I can think of. Not that I've seen one in real life either, but like in a film, that's something I've never seen. And I feel like that could almost be his like signature thing. Like if he's known as, say, a hitman or whatever, like, they find the body and then there's these 2 perfect gunshot wounds in the body. That's almost like his signature calling card almost. Do you know what I mean?
I like that.
And I think that is cool. I think that's something that could really work. Don't know if that's the case, obviously, but I feel like that's a good little angle. What do you think?
I hope they go for that, actually, because it's almost like, it's almost like a snake bite, isn't it? 2 holes right next to each other. But yeah, if that's his, like, basically you'll know who he's killed. Everyone, like, it's a bit like Scaramanga with a golden bullet. After he's killed someone, it's Scaramanga because there's a golden bullet left. Yeah. If Mr. Hinx kills someone and it's the double shot, it's him. And I think that's really good. I hope they play on that angle. It just gives him that extra layer then, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's an interesting point, isn't it? Like the whole snake bite thing. I hadn't thought about that. Or like the vampire bite, that whole kind of thing. So whether they're going to make a feature of that, I don't know. But yeah. So what's the deal then? What is the gun?
Yeah, so basically I read up a bit about it. So it's made by a company called Arsenal Firearms, and it's an AF 2011 Jeweler semi-automatic double-barrel pistol. Now I'm only going to say that once because it's a bit of a mouthful. Now this pistol, basically it feeds through 2 twin 8 rounds, single stack metal magazines, and it has 2 triggers on top. Now pulling either one of those 2 triggers will activate both barrels. So basically it doesn't matter which one you pull one back, but you'll fire out of both shots. The barrels themselves are 6.5 inches long and manufactured out of SUS 416 steel, and that is my favourite type of steel. So
mine too.
I think it's a good one. It delivered the actual company delivered 5 samples of the gun for production. Of course they were adapted to fire blanks because that would be rather dangerous if not. And if Mr. Hinx got upset, there could be a bit dodgy. So that's a bit more about it. Basically, it sounds great. I just hope it looks great, and I hope it's used well. Yeah. So it's not just it does that little something extra, and if it does that, I'll be chuffed, and I think they will do that.
Yeah, I think so. I personally, I think that's got to be his thing, Though in that photo he is wearing like a flat Del Boy Trotter hat. Maybe there's something with that. Maybe he throws that. I don't know. Maybe he's got
throws a flat cap.
Have that. Or maybe not.
It lands on someone's head perfectly, and then I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
Just makes him look old.
Yeah.
That's his weapon.
In other news, I stumbled across this little article online a little while ago that was basically talking about a film that Roger was in 1990 called Fire, Ice and Dynamite. Forgive me, I forgot to write down the actual name of the website I found it on, but it's like a Bond-related blog. So if you type in Roger Moore, Fire, Ice and Dynamite into Google, I'm sure you'll find it. And it was basically a film that he starred in, and his son Jeffrey was in it as well. That was made in 1990. Now the kind of review of it isn't that kindly. It is apparently not the best film in the world, but there was a very interesting little nugget contained within it. And that nugget is that film featured a stunt in which somebody bungee jumped off the very same dam that Bond jumps off in GoldenEye. Now, this was from 5 years before GoldenEye, and
that's crazy.
Isn't that funny? It's like never been. I've never heard that come up anywhere else before. It's the first I've heard of it. It's weird, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've never heard of it before. When you told me, I was like a bit thrown back, really. But how has it never been told before? You think with all the millions of Bond blogs and followers that no one's picked up on it before. But I want to see it now. I want to see the footage. I want to see how they captured it. Obviously, it's never going to be as aesthetic and cinematic as the GoldenEye bungee jump. But I remember with the Golden Eye jump, it set a world record. So this other one that they must have, if it is the same dam and whatever, which obviously they say it is, it must have been a smaller version of the jump. I mean, bungee jumping was really in its infancy back in 1990, so it'll be interesting. I just want to see that footage now, just to see.
Me too.
What
It's weird, isn't it? I guess, like you say, because there was all that talk about it being the biggest bungee jump in the world or whatever it was when GoldenEye came out. So it's weird that and the fact that it's got the Bond link with Roger as well, that it's never really been mentioned anywhere as far as I can tell. So maybe his rope was just a bit shorter or something, and he only jumped down a few feet or whatever it is. But he certainly didn't have his little laser.
I wonder if it's on YouTube. I wonder if it's on YouTube.
Good point. I didn't think to check that out, but there we go. Let's pass that one out to the JBR Army if they can find somewhere to watch that online. Perhaps that's Fire, Ice, and Dynamite, starring Roger Moore, and more importantly, it's the footage of that bungee jump. That'll be interesting to see. Yeah. So next up, it's time for some speculation. I like that.
I don't know what that was. I don't know where that came from. But
as per usual, if you want to skip the Bond speculation this week and the Spectre news, skip forward to
45 minutes and 43 seconds.
Very nice. Okay, so as per usual, if you're not a skipper, you're in through the naughty door. If you hear anything that you don't want to hear, then it's your own bloody fault as far as we're concerned.
Stick your fingers in your ears.
Yeah, exactly.
Run away now. Run away now.
Run away before it's too late. So what have you got for me this week, Chris?
So, as always, we'll start with Spectre filming. And we've got a bit of news here. So, we know that the Spectre crew are currently filming in London. It's brilliant because they're in London and we know it's going to be good. But I'm a bit gutted that I'm not there to see it or to witness it. Now, I knew it was coming over. I didn't know quite when. I've been away as well, so that probably didn't help. But, oh, man, we had that opportunity. Obviously, you're back in the States now as well.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice if we'd got down. I'm sure there must be some of our JBR listeners who at least went to watch a filming, like with Skyfall, when you saw M's car going to and fro, didn't you, last time around? I'm sure there are some of our listeners. So if any of our listeners have been in London to watch the scenes that have been filmed, please let us know, get in touch. And, if you've got any sneaky pics or anything, that's
I
cool
seem
too.
to recall Darren Noble, JBR listener Darren Noble, was planning on going. I think he sent us a message a while ago saying he was thinking about going up. Speaking of Darren Noble, I finally put my Aston Martin key ring on my keys. How cool is that?
Oh, cool!
There it is.
Nice.
What a kid.
Has it got an ejector seat in it?
Well, do you know what? It has the. You can see it carved into the roof. You've got the little
that
bit
is cool.
there if you can see that.
Yeah.
But
nice.
So it's nice. Thanks again for that, Darren. So I think he went along, and I saw Remit from the Bond lifestyle website, James Bond Lifestyle. He was there taking photos and stuff like that.
Excellent.
But yeah, man, I'm gutted we missed that because it's Daniel in action, isn't it? He's on a boat, and you could see him right there on the Thames.
Yeah, it's a bit strange in a way that it's very, very similar to the pre-titles of The World Is Not Enough. Again, it's Bond and Madeleine Swan on a powerboat, rocking down the Thames. We know that there's going to be the Big Ben, Houses of Parliament, the MI6 building. These are going to be backdrops which we've seen before. Yeah. So it's in the same, pretty much similar stretches of water as The World Is Not Enough chase. But the difference being now is that there's not a chase with another boat at the moment. Although there might be, but the main thing is there's a helicopter, which there's basically a bit of gunfire going between the helicopter and Bond and Madeleine Swan on the boat as they're going down the Thames. So this is interesting. First of all, obviously there's similarity to The World Is Not Enough, but again, we're back in London. Skyfall spent quite a lot of time in London when we had the Whitehall scene and the Underground and all this. And we're back in London again. And part of me loves that. Part of me, I didn't know how big, this looks like it could be a really big set piece. We mentioned last time that Morocco was a lot smaller scene than we thought it was going to be. And obviously Mexico was the pre-titles. So we know Austria and Rome are quite big, but there is going to be a lot in sort of London, the UK now. And this looks like another big action scene. could it be the finale of the film? Maybe, who knows?
It's interesting, isn't it? Like the thing with that is that I feel like the world is not enough boat chase is an iconic Bond boat chase. You know, that's going to be shown in montages for years and years to come, and rightly so, I think. Now, this little sequence is a night shoot, isn't it? So it's taking place at night. They're in like a normal rubber dinghy. There's no Q-boat or anything like that. And it's right by MI6, isn't it? In that stretch of water. So that does make me wonder. And my little bit of speculation on this, speculation, is that maybe this is somehow linked to them moving from the MI6 headquarters at Vauxhall to the hidden Universal Exports kind of location. Because it's like, if there's an enemy helicopter right outside MI6, it's like, you know, the heat's been brought a little bit too much. The previous guy blew the place up, and now we've got a helicopter firing weapons outside of it. Maybe it's time to move on to Universal Exports and have a secret location as opposed to a big advertised one right on the Thames. What do you reckon?
I like the idea behind it, but I think going down the Thames on a boat is probably not the most inconspicuous way of finding new things. But no, I don't know. What do I think? I think obviously it's got to somehow relate to that MI6 building. I don't know if it's a middle of the film or if it's the end of the film. I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But we know that they're filming for 2 or 3 weeks, so this isn't just like a little sequence. This is going to be quite a meaty action scene, I think. So it was interesting to see. You know, we've seen a few stills. It'd be good to see. Obviously, we don't want to know the full details until the film comes out, but interesting.
Always interesting to see Bond being shot. Absolutely. Cool stuff.
So once they're sort of done in London, they'll be moving to Morocco at the start of June, which is, well, not far away at all, really. And in Morocco, the principal cast are going to be Monica Bellucci, Léa Seydoux, and Christoph Waltz. So nice. I'm not sure, as far as I'm aware, I don't think Daniel Craig is going to be there. We know that the Morocco shoot is actually going to be quite short in terms of screen time. It might not be more than 5-10 minutes maximum. So, you know, if it is Bellucci and Christoph Waltz, will it be something Spectre meeting or Quantum or Oberhauser meeting? And if Madeleine Swan is there, does that mean she's perhaps investigating them while Bond's not there? And that's how she gets caught up into it. Maybe she's in deep cover or something. And maybe interesting. I wonder if her character is going to be. I hope it's not a Rosamund. I hope it's not a Miranda Frost where it's goody twist and she's actually a baddie. And I don't think, I don't think it will be, because that's obviously it's been done before a few times. But if it was something like, you know, maybe when you initially see her. Well, we know she works for MI6, but if she's somehow gets involved with the Spectre or the Quantum organisation, I think that would be quite cool. I think obviously her and Bond are going to be working together at points, but I also think we'll see her working or out not with Bond, so by herself doing something.
That's it. So, the thing is in that first batch of like behind the scenes footage that they released a while ago, that picture of Hinx in the passenger seat of the car turning around with the gun, the person sat in the back seat there is Miranda Frost is Léa Seydoux. So she is under, like, you know, she's been taken captive by Hinx at that point. So I feel like, you know, she's probably not going to do a Miranda Frost. But they're interesting. So what kind? They're filming in the Medina, Tangiers Medina, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's the old part of the town. Actually, that will come across really cool because it's full of narrow, sort of maze-like streets. You can imagine a cool foot chase going on or something like that through there. So I think that's going to be quite cool. It's also filming in an oasis in the southeast of the country, pronounced Urfo, I think, or Urfo,
very nice,
or Urfu, or something like
food.
that.
Something like that.
Yes, that's right. And that's near the border between Morocco and Algeria. So that, again, an interesting location, isn't it?
Yeah,
if there's
absolutely.
a desert oasis.
Do you know what? I'm feeling good about this, right? Because as much as I love to see London in a Bond film, Skyfall felt a little bit British grey for me. Do you know what I mean? With all that cloud cover, and I've had enough of that. Do you know what I mean? Like I've had a lifetime of that in England, and it would have been nice to see a little bit more. You had obviously sort of Turkey at the very beginning, but that was it. It was sort of like glum old England and Scotland throughout Skyfall, and I'm feeling good about the locations we've got here. Rome, we've got Morocco, we've got Mexico. This feels like a proper globe-trotting Bond again, which
Austria as well.
Austria, of course. Yeah, there's quite a few locations, man. And very different sort of terrain as well. Going from snow to Morocco and Mexico and obviously London in the middle there. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me too. I want to see some nice visual landscapes. Which we're with Hoyt van Hoytema, we're definitely going to get. And what about the bit? Obviously it must be from Austria, where he's from the trailer where he's on that tiny little boat going towards Mr. White. That looked beautiful, didn't it? That looked lovely. In fact, I can't believe how bad this is. I don't think I've watched the teaser trailer for at least a week now. Is that bad?
Do you know what? I haven't either, actually. Oh, we should.
I think. Right.
As soon as we finish recording, let's go and have a little watch.
We'll get it on, and we'll get excited again. Okay, cool. Sounds good. So that pretty much wraps up the filming news so far. All we knew is the Morocco scene, maybe maximum 10 minutes on screen. So we know it's not a big one. Bond might not be in it, but a lot of the Spectre lot will, so that's good. But in London at the moment. Then after Morocco's done, I think it's just going to be interiors, studios,
Pinewood.
And then after that, they're into post. So they've got it's.
Do you know what? There's two things about this that needs to be mentioned. That it's almost June. Basically, it's getting on for June, and I can't quite believe that we're halfway through this year already. Time's going very quickly. And that's a sad thing, because it's like, man, I don't want time to go so quickly. But on a Bond film year, I kind of almost, if it would be possible to wipe out the year until you hit the point of the Bond film release, I would vote for that every time, because it's like football fans with the World Cup, isn't it? It's even better than that as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
No, it is. Of course, it is. And then you just want time to slow down. As you get, maybe in like the week before release. The big build-up and the anticipation. The week before you're going to see it, and then on the day, if you're lucky enough to go to a premiere, even a local one, if you get sort of your dinner jacket on, get a few cocktails, get the vibe going, play the Bond tunes as you're listening, watch the teaser trailer or the proper trailer for the 10 millionth time. Just
it's getting exciting.
It's not far. Great. So that's pretty much speculation film-wise. Now, there was a bit more speculation about the theme song, actually. Ooh. Now, this one, so it's not confirmed, but, we've had various sort of sources and various people that we sort of have chatted to, and I've now heard from at least 2 or 3 completely unrelated sort of sources that the next singer for the James Bond theme song for Spectre is none other than Mr. Sam Smith. Now, this obviously hasn't been confirmed by Eon. It might not. It might be pure speculation. Who knows? But this has been noted by at least 2 or 3 people who know their stuff sometimes. So, what do you think about that?
It's funny, isn't it? Because that name has been thrown around since the very beginning, hasn't it? It's been, Sam Smith was one of the first names. But this has come from sort of several different sources to us that are being like, I've heard from someone on very good authority, it's already been chosen, it's Sam Smith. And that it's, obviously, they've got to remain nameless, but it's come from several different sources. So it does make you wonder, with this film, so much has been leaked. The full script, for example, back in November or December, whenever that was, so much has been leaked. It does make me wonder whether this is in fact true. The funny thing about it, though, is that he's not. I mean, he's obviously big. He's had a big hit on both sides of the pond, America and in Europe as well. But he sort of doesn't strike me as kind of like a natural progression. You've got somebody like Jack White, who is a huge star. You've got Adele, who at the time was like biggest star on the planet, guaranteed #1 single pretty much going with her. Whereas this guy is a bit of a new kid on the block, isn't he? He's not obviously not the band New Kids on the Block, but like the they'd make a good theme, wouldn't they? And then, but like he's kind of like the new kid on the block, but he is a big name. So yeah, I'm kind of in two minds about it. Again, having said that, Chris Cornell was way out of left field, wasn't he? So it's I think what it all boils down to is the song any good? It doesn't matter who sings it if the song is great. Yeah. So I'm just glad they're not racking out like sort of cheesy pop people. Do you know what I mean? That they might have done back in the day. Like you wouldn't want to hear, I don't know, Lady Gaga do one. Do you know what I mean? I think that would be a little bit dodgy. Or Katy Perry. Do you know what I mean? That's not what you want.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, Sam Smith, we know he's got a good voice. I mean, I've only heard probably maybe 2 or 3 of his songs, so I don't know a lot about, I haven't listened to a whole album or anything, but we know he's got a good voice. I think if the right song is there, he'd be a good choice, definitely. So yeah, definitely no complaints, but it would just be interesting to see, how it goes, I guess. Yeah. And also whether this actually does get confirmation at some point, but I don't think Eon are going to be ready to release that for quite a while yet.
So that about wraps up the speculation for this week. So it's there's much food for thought going on in there, and I'm sure it's only going to ramp up as the weeks go on. And like you said, the filming is probably it's not going to be that much longer in terms of filming. Yeah. Certainly most of the kind of last leg's probably going to happen in Pinewood, so it's all going to be behind closed doors.
When do you think the actual full trailer will be released?
What are we on now? End of May. If it's not here by the end of July, I would be surprised. I would say, because then I think
they have to release something.
Yeah, because it's like then you're in the final 3 months before release, so it's got to that's when things are really going to kick in, I think. So there we are, and we'll be right there on the front lines reporting JBR Styly.
Right.
In our underpants and our JBR t-shirts, ready to rock and roll. So, speculation out of the way. We've had a few emails and comments from the JBR listeners, and funnily enough, just this morning we had a random message through from Ralph Lewandowski, who you'll remember as the arse-kicking judo champion, who was also well dressed in the 1 year anniversary episode, who took down his assailant. My favourite story so far. And his message said, "Hello, Chris. Hello, Tom. I had a really bad day today. Sorry to hear that, Ralph. But it had a surprisingly good ending. A few years ago, we got a mobile phone for my grandma. Those specifically designed for elder people. She had no idea how to send text messages and used it only to call her relatives. Until today, I just got the first ever text from her written in all caps saying, 'We are watching Skyfall.' It was so unexpected. She's a Bond fan like the rest of my family, and Roger is her favourite 007, but the newer films never really grabbed her attention. This and the fact that apparently she learned how to send texts at the age of 83 years completely blew my mind away. And guess what? It turns out she saw Casino Royale 2 weeks ago and Quantum of Solace last week too. When asked about it, she said the action sequences are a bit too jumpy and quick, especially in Quantum, but she really appreciated the love story about Vesper and the score of both films. I'll ask her later about her thoughts on Skyfall, but seeing how it incorporates more of the old Bond formula, I'm sure she'll like it as well. The smashing news made my heart grow even fonder of my dear granny. Thus, the day came on an end on a truly high note. Cheers, Ralph. P.S. Chris, you haven't taken part in those marathons yet, have you? If you haven't, good luck. I'm still positively shocked. There we go.
That's great, isn't it? That's a lovely message.
That is a lovely story, isn't it? A bit of granny action from Ralph there.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting now. If she likes Skyfall, maybe he'll take her to watch Spectre in the cinema when that comes out as well.
Well, maybe, Ralph, you can interview your granny on what she thinks of the 3 Daniel films and get some audio for us, and maybe we'll play it on the show, and we'll get Granny Lewandowski's. She can have her own little segment of the show. Bond time with Granny Lewandowski. But there we go.
Excellent. Now we've had a few other listener questions that have come in as well. So we had a quite an interesting question from Simon Goodwin. So he says, "Hi Chris and Tom. So I have a question. Will Daniel Craig's Bond smoke? He's the only one who hasn't so far. The Bond of the books was a heavy smoker. The first time we see Bond on the silver screen, he's chuffing away on a moorland. Sean, George, Roger, Tim and Pierce have all had a cigarette or a cigar over the years. Will Danny boy? Now, due to changing social times, we've seen the demise of some classic Bond traits. The hat toss has gone, the sexism, etc. Now, will every screen Bond suffer a raspy cough and angina? Anyway, one to think about. Love the podcasts. As always, my faithful companion in the car on the way to work. Keep up the great work, Simon Goodwin. Now, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Will we see Danny Boy smoke? What do you think?
It is a funny one there, isn't it? If you take it back to the beginning, you've got the very first introduction of Sean as Bond, the very first introduction of Bond. He's sitting at the casino table. He's got the cigarette on the go. He says the iconic line. And to me, that is probably the coolest image of Bond we've ever had. Like right there, the first one, brilliant.
I agree.
And a cigarette is part of that. Obviously, Roger had his cigars, and I do love that. I love how, like, you know, where he's on his little hang glider on his way to San Monique, and he's got his cigar on the go and all that kind of business. Same with Hip standing on his shoulders in Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was great.
Did George smoke? He must have done.
George had a cigarette.
When does he smoke? I can't think of that off the top of my head.
He smokes when he's he smokes a pipe, doesn't he, when he's pretending to be Hillary Gray?
So he does. Yeah, I forgot about that.
So we can add pipes to the
pipes in there as well.
I think he has a cigarette when he's sitting down, either chatting to Draco. Yeah, he has a cigarette when he's chatting to Draco. He offers him, and he has one of his own, doesn't he?
There we go. So George Timothy had a little smoke, didn't he?
Yes.
And then Pierce obviously had his cigar in Die Another Day. So they've all had a go except Daniel. Now it's a funny one, isn't it? Because it's I feel like Sean's Bond in the 60s. That was like, it was in those days everybody smoked, didn't it? It was like such a common thing, and it was a part of those times. Nowadays, it's very, very different. And I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I feel like, I don't know. I don't think it would really work with Daniel for some reason. I'm just purely not on any kind of evidence, but like just based on a gut feeling, I just feel like it would look a bit strange to have him smoke. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I agree, but for quite a number of reasons, really. First of all, I think, back in the 60s, everyone smoked, and I agree, Connery, although I'm a non-smoker, I'm not a big believer in it, but you can't mistake how freaking cool Connery looked in that image.
Yeah.
It is the epitome of Bond cool. I mean, it looks amazing. But I was actually really surprised about Pierce smoking, because obviously at the start of Tomorrow Never Dies, there's that guy smoking. There's a guy that's got a cigarette and he asks for a lighter, and then Bond punches him and says filthy habit, and you think, well, okay, this is an updated Bond now. We're in the 90s, Bond doesn't smoke. And obviously Pierce didn't smoke in GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, or The World Is Not Enough, but then Die Another Day comes along and he's having a cigar, and that did actually surprise me, and I didn't think I'd actually get to see Pierce smoke, but obviously we did. I think in this day and age it wouldn't be right. I don't think Daniel should smoke. I think the only way he'd ever possibly have to was if he was in disguise or in the guise of someone who smoked, and he had to just for that. But also, Connery in real life smoked, Roger Moore in real life smoked, Timothy Dalton in real life smoked. Daniel doesn't, and
does he not? I've heard reports that he is a smoker.
Or maybe he does actually.
I'm gonna get on the Googles and find out.
Actually, maybe he does.
I think he does. I think I've heard it that he does. Daniel Craig smoke. Is he a smoker? Let's see, and then we can look at this picture and see if he looks good with a cigarette. Or I've Google image search. It says Craig has a constant struggle to give up smoking. That's one of the headlines.
There we go.
Maybe he's been an on and off smoker over the years. Yeah. Well, you know what? There is loads of pictures of him with a cigarette on the go, and the cigars actually on Google image search. And I've got to tell you, he does look fucking cool.
Does he rock it?
There's a black and white shot of him in a suit with a waistcoat on, with a cigarette on the go. And I've seen that, I actually take it all back, and I think he looks rad with a cigarette. Yeah, how funny.
Really?
Yeah.
But do you think from the sort of health and safety, not health and safety, the
setting a good example
sort of
for young people.
Exactly. Yeah. Right, I'm going to try and find that same thing. Do you think we should see one then? What's your personal opinion about? Do you think that matters? Do you think that's do you think that's a thing, or do you think it's part of the character and that's how Bond should be?
I think Daniel is very close to Fleming's Bond, possibly the closest we've had. And at the end of the day, a lot of Bond's behaviour isn't really setting the best example for young people, is it? No,
that's true.
You don't want to see kids climbing up on cranes and doing massive jumps and all that kind of stuff without a significant amount of practice. I don't know. It's a funny one. Can you see? Have you seen that? Can you see that image? If you just put Daniel Craig smoke into Google image search,
he looks. It almost you can tell he is a smoker just by looking at these, because I don't know, it suits him. It does, doesn't it? It's bad.
For me, as a non-smoker, I've never been a smoker at all. No. And for me as a non-smoker, I think smoking's gross. I'm one of those that if I'm sitting outside eating and somebody near me smoking, I'm like, oh, fucking piss off. Do you know what I mean? It's not nice as a non-smoker, and it is pretty gross. But if you're going to look rad in a film as James Bond, I think, why not? Because I mean, he does look rad. At least I don't have to smell it. Now, something I stumbled across the other day, I was walking along and there was a poster for, which I've mentioned before actually, a poster for the final season of Mad Men. Have you ever seen that with John Hamm?
No,
that series?
No, I haven't seen Mad Men.
So if you haven't seen it, it's basically set in the 60s. The title sequence of Mad Men is like a direct rip-off of Casino Royale's title sequence with the silhouettes and stuff. Okay. Looks exactly the same. Very Bondian. And so it's basically set in an ad agency in the 60s. And the poster just makes me think of Goldfinger when he's tailing Goldfinger in the roles. Can you see that very well on the?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I can.
And he's got a cigarette on the go as well. I don't know if you can see because it's very small. You can see his hand hanging out the window and he's got a cigarette on the go. And I look at that and I'm like, I've never been a supporter of having an American actor play Bond. I always thought he should be British or in some way related to British. But I look at that and I'm like, man, if you were going to have an American actor play Bond, he'd be fucking great.
He'd be good, yeah.
And that poster is amazing. Like if you type in like Mad Men final season poster, you should see it. It almost, obviously he's not in an Aston Martin, but if you pictured him in an Aston Martin, it is Bond sitting there. Like, I mean, it just is. It's crazy. So it's an interesting debate to be had is about the whole smoking one. I feel like, it's a tough one. As a non-smoker, I'm not a fan of smoking and being around smokers, but it's Bond. He's not meant to be a blazing sort of beacon of good behaviour. He's meant to be, if you're following Fleming, pretty much the exact opposite of that. So I wouldn't be averse to it, seeing it on screen, I don't think.
No. Okay. Well, interesting. It's a good debatable point. Maybe that's another one we can stick as our Bond question of the day. Should we ever see Bond smoke again? And
there we go.
See what we get.
I'll add that one to the queue. That is a good question.
Yeah, there we go.
We've also had a question from George Lazenby's number one fan, Sheila James. She says,
wow.
Hello, Chris and Tom. I love George. I wanted to send you a she didn't really say that, but I added it in for good effect. Hello, Chris and Tom. I wanted to send you a trivia question I hope you will enjoy. You are both knowledgeable, and that is hard to stump you. Here is my question. In On Her Majesty's Secret Service, how many times does George Lazenby as James Bond refer to Tracy as Contessa? There are numerous times this title is used by James Bond and other characters, but how many by James Bond? I'll send another message later with the answers. Enjoy your weekend, Sheila. This is a tough one for me, to be honest. Yeah. I can hear him saying Contessa, so I know he says it at least once. But in terms of how many times he says it, I wouldn't have a clue. I guess I would say maybe 2 or 3 times.
See, obviously I can hear it a few times, but I mean, I had to hazard a guess when I heard it. And I thought it was a few more. I guessed it's 6, but I couldn't hear all of those 6. There are definitely a few that I can hear, but I'm assuming that I couldn't remember all of them. So I guessed it's 6, but there's 1 or 2 that really stand out for me. One of them, which I love. But yeah, so I guessed it's 6. So do we have an answer?
Should we reveal the thoughts? Because I mean, these are your thoughts, to be honest, that you've written down for me. So these are your ones. So why don't you reel them off?
Okay, so this is basically this is a reply from Sheila. She said they were actually 5. So I was 1 out, and I think you were 1 out. But these are the 5 that Sheila at least sort of found. So 1 was, why do you persist in saving me, Mr. Bond? It's becoming a habit, Contessa Teresa. That's first. Nice. Number 2, you're full of surprises, Contessa. I can be a lot more persuasive, Contessa. I really like that one. That's a good one. And then when Draco introduces his daughter to Bond at the bullfight, he says Contessa then. And in the barn, he says, sorry about the accommodation, Contessa. And that's quite a good one.
Nice.
So Sheila doesn't remember him saying Contessa during the raid on Peace Gloria. And once they're married, he says Mrs. Bond. So if anyone can think of any others, we've got 5 there. But
let's pass that one out. That was similar to a question we had, didn't we, last year about how many times did dogs show up in Bond films? And then we kind of we gave our thoughts, and then there was a million others from the JBR listeners who were like, there's a dog having a wee in Thunderball and all that kind of stuff behind the Junkanoo Parade and all that. So if you can think of any other times George says Contessa in On Her Majesty's, I would imagine that Sheila is perhaps the number one authority, second only to Charles Helfenstein, obviously about On Her Majesty's. So Charles, if you're listening, can you think of any more? But let us know on Facebook or Twitter if you know any other points where he says Contessa.
Okay, and we have another question from JBR listener Andreas Charalan Bus, who likes to be known as Andy, which is very, very
that was helpful. Thank you.
Cheers, Andy. And he says, "Hi, Tom and Chris. Just a few words to tell you how I'm loving your podcasts. I never thought I would find watching 3-hour videos so enjoyable. I became a Bond fan when Dr. No was first played on ITV in October 1975. Even before VHS, I recorded the film on my reel-to-reel tape recorder and surprised my wife the other day when the film was playing and I could accurately recite the entire movie word for word. Very nicely done."
Very nicely done indeed.
Since then, I have been to all the London premieres of the Bonds of the 80s and all the press screenings of the Bonds of the 90s. I have since emigrated to Argentina and feel a bit of a sadness when a new Bond is released and I'm no longer able to attend a world premiere. But I'm pleased I can at least see the event live on the web. So keep up the great work and thanks again. Watching the podcast is like being among Bond friends again, as it's not so big here in Argentina. At the cinema, it's just me and the missus with the cinema all to ourselves. Anyway, hope to talk to you guys again soon. All the best, Andy. Oh, that was another lovely message, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And he's been to a lot of premieres, which I'm rather jealous about.
Yeah, me too. It's funny, isn't it? Like you imagine Bond's huge everywhere, but if it's Argentina is one of those few places in the world where Bond isn't as big as it is elsewhere, that's funny, isn't it?
No, maybe he should visit Argentina as a location.
That'll sort it out, won't it? That'll bring it around.
That'll rank up the tourism and get people into it, I think. There we go. So Bond 25, Barbara and Michael Wilson, if you're listening, Argentina.
There you go. Good stuff. So after the listener questions, their messages, we've had a new post by Linda Zhu over at Station C. Where she's wrecking out the latest this week in James Bond. Now, the word on the street, leaked by Simon Pegg, is that Danny Boy is going to be a stormtrooper in Star Wars The Force Awakens. So it's going to be uncredited, and he's just going to be a random stormtrooper. So we're going to have to play a game of Spot Daniel when we watch that film later in the year.
Do you think he'll have something about his person which makes him ever so slightly different to every other stormtrooper?
Do you mean like a little bow tie painted on his armour? Maybe, yeah. I think
exactly, yeah. Or a PPK strapped to his thing instead of a stormtrooper gun. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously, I don't think it is. And I think this is a story which we heard. It was actually quite a while ago. There was sort of rumours about it, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's just a load of tosh." But it's obviously happening. But yeah, do you think, how are we going to know? Or are we ever going to find out?
I think perhaps that'll be something that kind of comes out officially, because when he revealed it, he said, "Oh, I wasn't meant to mention that." So I think what's going to happen is after the film comes out, it'll probably be leaked, and it'll be like, I don't know whether, I would imagine they'll never tell us which one Daniel is, because it'll be too distracting. Everybody will be like, there he is, there's Daniel, there's Daniel. But I mean, what an amazing thing for him to do, like to be able to sit back and just be completely anonymous and just like be a part of Star Wars. That would be amazing. Yeah. So
here's an interesting question. Do you think he will now set a trend for future Star Wars movies where all of A-list Hollywood people want to now be stormtroopers? So instead of extras, there'll be like 50 A-list celebrities behind the Stormtrooper masks.
Yeah, maybe. Absolutely.
That'd be a good little canteen session at lunchtime if that was the case, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Other news in her post. There's been another DB5, as in Goldfinger, sold for $600,000 at auction. That's pounds.
Nice.
So that's just shy of $1 million, with a drop top version fetching just over £1.5 million. Which is they're pretty pricey, aren't they? Those ones. And there's plenty of news this week. There's loads of stuff. There's been a newly discovered rodent named after James Bond. The author of The Birds of the West Indies, who also studied rodents apparently. Naomi Harris talks about her favourite Bond. There's pictures of Leah Seydoux and Ben Whishaw at Cannes promoting their film The Lobster, and with Mrs. Craig as well, Rachel Weisz, and which I loved. I really appreciate this photo of It's the World Is Not Enough, Sophie Marceau, who is also in attendance. I love me some Sophie.
And she's still rocking it.
Absolutely,
rocking it,
yeah. One of my favourites.
Gorgeous.
Goodness gracious me,
Yeah.
she certainly gets me bubbling, that one.
She's a stunner. I love it when people kind of grow old, but they never seem to lose their appeal and their allure. And you can, and Sophie Marceau is definitely one of those types of people.
Yeah, completely. Well, Lucia Sciarra is another example of that, isn't she? Rocking 50 years old and still banging. Yeah. Well, that's the end of the sexist, misogynist dinosaur section of today's episode. She's fucking lovely, that one. Oh, lovely. Very nice. Anyway,
sorry about that.
So, moving swiftly on, it's time for some Bond trivia, Chris.
Trivia.
So in last week's episode, when we recorded it, the Colonel Sun episode that failed disastrously, I had a trivia question for you, and because I know you now know the answer to that, I'm going to give you a different one. So I'm keeping you on your toes.
Well, do you know what? I'm going to give you the same one because I haven't come up with a new one, but also because it's a more than one thing answer. So I'll be interested to see if you've remembered. Do
you know what? I can't even remember what it is you asked me.
So I'll start this week then. Okay, right. I'll start with my one. So my Bond trivia question is, we're talking about, obviously, Colonel Sun, the review. Now, my Bond trivia question is, in the James Bond film series, how many different colonels can you name?
Oh, yes. And still, there's only that is a tough question, man. Colonels. Generals I'm pretty good at, but colonels are tough. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, so my Bond trivia question of the day is, on which Bond movie poster would you find the tagline, "His bad side is a dangerous place to be"?
Ooh, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
His bad side is a dangerous place to be. I like that.
Do you know what? It's funny when I was kind of feeding in some of the Bond question of the days for Facebook and Twitter into the queue, and sort of thinking about different areas of Bond to ask questions about, and the movie posters was one of them. And it made me think. It's made me realise how many different areas of Bond that are so amazing that there is to talk about, from the music to the pre-title sequences to the gun barrels to the songs. And down to the posters, there's so much amazing material in there. Do you know what I mean? Like that's ripe for discussion. Definitely.
It's across the board, isn't it? That's why Bond's so great, because everything about it is just immense.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. So we'll reveal the answer to those questions later on in today's episode. Okay, so it's time for the meat and potatoes of today's episode, which is the review of Colonel Sun, obviously. So I thought we'd kick things off. Now, you've got your edition there. I've got my edition here. Lovely. Different editions.
Very nice.
And my one has a special introduction written by Kingsley Amis. So I thought it's a little bit lengthy, but I thought I would read it as a nice little introduction to where the man himself was coming from with the book, and kind of what his intentions were and all that kind of stuff. So the interesting thing about this is the book was published in 1968, obviously, and he's writing this in 1991 from London.
Okay, wow.
So he's kind of looking back at it years and years later, especially considering, what Bond had become on screen by that point and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I suppose one thing to keep in mind is when he wrote the book in 68, we'd only had, 5 Bond films at that point. You Only Live Twice would have just come out, and it wouldn't have kind of gone, we wouldn't have had the Spy Who Loved Me's and Rogers and all those kinds of movies. So it's an interesting kind of angle, a lens to look at it through, if you will. So I'm going to read this through. Here we go.
Go for it.
Introduction. I wrote this book sidestepping out of my career as a straight novelist for the occasion because I was asked to do so and because I found the project irresistible. When Ian Fleming died before his time in 1964, it was felt that James Bond was too popular a figure to be allowed to follow him. Who was around that might provide a passable successor to the Fleming canon? No doubt I seemed as likely a lad as most. My last novel under my own name had bits of espionage in it. More to the point, I had published in 1965 what was intended as a light-hearted and sympathetic survey of the original 13 volumes, the James Bond dossier. Most of it written before Fleming's death and approved by him in all but 3 tiny details, which I corrected. And as I said, I could not wait to try it. I wonder what those 3 details were that you got wrong.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? That would be juicy.
Yeah. Quite soon I had the makings of a plot, though just as with my other novels, I had never been able to remember what order they turned up in. But the matter of setting, of where, so important in all of Bond's adventures, must have arisen and been decided earlier on. He had never yet operated in mainland Greece, let alone the islands, any more than I had. But then I had an American mate, bilingual in Greek, who had already promised to show me everything from the Acropolis in Athens and Dionysios, I can't pronounce that word, restaurant overlooking it, to roads across the strait from Turkey and squid and ouzo on the waterfront. And so he did, and more. Before starting off, I already knew a good deal about the question why. Why Bond must go to Greece? Well, the villainous Colonel's son, on mission from his adventure-minded masters, the Red Chinese, is on an Aegean island plotting to blow not only against the West in general, but Greece in particular, but against Russia. So Bond gets a Russian girl assistant. Also, M is there, not by choice. And one good reason for his presence is my having noticed on the map that his house in Windsor Park is only a few miles by back roads from London Airport. So anybody planning to kidnap him and smuggle him out of the country, ... It took me 2 trips, of course, to Athens and Piraeus and past Cape Sunion to the Cyclades island group Kia, Kithnos, Seriphos, Sifnos, Paros, Naxos, Ios, amongst the last of the 3, which I placed my invented island of Rakanisi. The first trip was to pick up ideas, the second to get the details right, essential in any Bond novel. It was no trouble at all to find the best olives, the best shellfish, the best local wine, and the sun, the sea, and the islands would have filled a dozen notebooks. We went in a 50-foot converted fishing boat called the Altair, the twin and namesake of the one in the book, and there was a certain amount to be said of that vessel and that experience. Catch me trying it today in those treacherous waters. I eked out this kind of material with the Secret Service jargon and supposed organisational background I had soaked in from my reading of Fleming and of certain factual pamphlets. So that's interesting, isn't it, in the sense that Fleming was soaked in the espionage world because he was involved in it, whereas this dude is like not at all. So it's interesting to see how that comes across. There was one useful field I knew in detail and at first hand, some of the infantry weaponry of the Second World War. So in Colonel's Son, a goodie shoots a baddie not with a contemporary repeating weapon, but with a more accurate Lee Enfield bolt-action rifle, and the heroine wields a Thompson submachine gun, a piece I renewed acquaintance with when the real Altair turned out to have a working specimen in its locker. In Greece, you never know, said the captain. But the James Bond of Dr. Noel Goldfinger would have needed far more in the way of technical expertise than I could supply. Amos-style Bond found himself attacking the enemy with hand grenades or a hunting knife, bolting sausages and fruit before the night assault, going in for the kill on his own 2 feet. No hovercraft, no helicopters, no rockets, and no double portions of beluga caviar served in candlelit restaurants by white-jacketed waiters. He finds no use for the picklock and baby transmitter and the rest of the gadgets supplied by Q Branch on his departure. His own strength, determination, and ingenuity are enough. The contrast is less with the original Bond, the real Bond of the Fleming novels, than with the Bond of the films. That rakish non-entity who drops a Yobbo-style throwaways out of the corner of his mouth before or after escaping by personal jetpack or submersible car fitted with missile launchers or reactor-powered iceberg. So that's interesting. He's not a big fan of the films, obviously. The most ludicrous divergence yet is that between the book of The Spy Who Loved Me, about how a nice Canadian girl down on her luck is rescued from a couple of small-time hoods by a decent English copper called James Bond, and the film of that title, which has a psychopath trying to start World War III by hijacking US and Russian submarines and Bond being incredibly active in stopping him. Fleming's Bond found plenty of time to be active, and more believably and so more thrillingly in the intervals of behaving like a recognisable human being. No one would call him one of the great character portraits of English literature, but he is much more of a person than the mere silhouette his creator disparagingly called him. Tough, yes, resourceful and all that, but fully capable of indignation, compunction, remorse, tenderness, and a protective instinct towards defenceless creatures. See, for example, the Hildebrand Rarity and Thunderball. And so his adventures are much more interesting than the adolescent fantasies of the cinematic James Bond. It seems right to end this with thoughts of Ian Fleming, who was a masterly action story writer in the tradition of Conan Doyle and John Buchan. I, for one, found it beyond me to follow worthily in his footsteps, but I am honoured to have been given the chance of trying and found it all great fun. So,
Wow.
How do you feel about that?
Well, like you said, he's not a fan of the films, is he? He's obviously liked Fleming and liked what Fleming had done and wanted to follow in those sort of footsteps. But yeah, cinematically, he wasn't all that keen. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Again, you sort of mentioned, obviously, with Fleming, he's naval intelligence, had that background with the war. Kingsley Amis basically had to immerse himself within literature and within other sort of knowledge that he could gather just to get an idea of that world. And after reading the book, he obviously did a good job because it came across pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it, in the sense that, like, here we are at a point where, you know, Fleming died in 1964 and this is coming out in 1968. The Man with the Golden Gun came out in 1965. So this is kind of pretty much I think Man with the Golden Gun came out in April of 1965 and this came out in March of 1968, if I remember correctly. So it's almost 3 years to the month of the last Fleming book. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's like when we spoke to Raymond Benson and he was like, the whole discussion before he started writing was, you know, let's take an equivalent of like Brosnan's Bond that's in the cinema at the moment and make a literary version of that. So that's obviously, you know, he's not trying to be Ian Fleming there. He was just trying to add a little bit of Fleming flavour to the Brosnan kind of mould. And that was the angle they were facing. Whereas he's kind of like, he's almost, by not having him use Q's gadgets in this book, he's almost sort of like reacting against the movies, isn't he? He's like trying to push us far away from that as he possibly can, which is an interesting tactic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I think it suits the book well. And it's also interesting that he wrote the James Bond dossier.
Yeah.
Which initially, when I heard the title, I thought it was based on all the films, but obviously it wasn't.
No, absolutely.
Have you had a chance to look at that yourself?
Do you know what? I haven't. I've never read that book, so it'll be worth having a look. So there we go. So that's kind of like setting the scene in the sense that, like, we know kind of from that introduction what angle he's coming from. Did you have that little intro in your book or not?
No, I didn't know. It had. Well, this one was one of the early ones, so.
I think looking at that cover, that was like the copy I had back when I was 12 in the old secondhand bookshop, like the old school paperback.
In fact, this one is from first published 1968. This edition 1970.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Very nice. Cool
really
stuff.
Old school.
Cool. Okie dokie. So, I suppose a good place to start with any of the Bond books is like the very first line, isn't it? It's like, you know, that first line of Casino Royale is quoted everywhere. So let's have a look at the first line of Colonel Sun and see if it passes muster. I'm going to perform it in my best book reading voice as I possibly can.
Okay.
James Bond stood at the middle tees of the 18th on the Sunningdale New Course, enjoying the tranquil normality of a sunny English afternoon in early September. Reactions?
Smiling. I like it. Very Bondian. Sets the scene exquisitely. It's very visual, and to me, shouts James Bond. I think it's brilliant.
I think
Big
that's
fan.
a cracking opening line. That it's really good.
Yeah.
Like when you compare it, so like if you look at the opening line of Casino Royale, you've got the scent, smoke, and sweat of a casino are nauseating at 3 a.m. Okay, everyone remembers that line. And then if you look at Goldfinger's first line, it says, James Bond, with 2 double bourbons inside him, sat in the final departure lounge of Miami Airport and thought about life and death. Now, for me, if I didn't know any better and you jumbled those 3 lines around and said which one is not Fleming, I don't think I'd be able to tell the difference.
No, that is extremely good point. He's captured Fleming so well, hasn't he? And that is a Fleming line, I think. Yeah. And again, it shouts Goldfinger with the obviously the relating to the golf and stuff like that. I just it's picture perfect, isn't it? Really for.
Do you know what that makes me think? When I read that first chapter, and obviously it's the golf game, it makes me want to see Bond play golf on the screen again. You know, I think it would be like, obviously you wouldn't just remake the Goldfinger thing. It could just be a casual, like 2-minute thing, like, you know, maybe Bond's just playing around a golf and he gets a call from the office or something. Do you know what I mean? I think Daniel would look rad on a golf course. Yeah, it would certainly make me smile.
He would certainly get some knitwear on the go, wouldn't he?
He certainly would, wouldn't he? Yeah, he would definitely get his knitwear out. But yeah, so that's the first line, which I think is a brilliant opener. And then when we look at the first chapter, I suppose any first chapter of any book has got a lot of work to do, in the sense, especially when it's a continuation book and you've got all this cast of characters that you know, and it's like, okay, what are they all doing? What are they up to? And it kind of ties that all up really nicely. So basically Bond's playing golf with Bill Tanner.
Which I thought was really cool as well, seeing him out in the field, not even on a mission, but just out enjoying himself with Bill Tanner, because he's
in
like
a field playing golf. No, totally. It's kind of, it's always been said how Tanner was his mate, basically his friend. But yeah, in my memory, you don't see them spending a lot of time together, do you? So it's nice to actually see him like just chilling out, playing around a golf with old Bill. And it mentions, doesn't it? It's like it says it mentions the events of the Man with the Golden Gun the previous summer. It's like there's no messing about here. It's directly after the Man with the Golden Gun's events, and he references the bullet wound in his abdomen from Scaramanga's Derringer. So it's like there's no messing about. It's like it's the same Bond from the Fleming stories carried on. And there's this little bit actually, which I thought, in terms of like where Bond is in his life at this point, there's this little extract that I wanted to read, which I will read to you right now. There we go. Okay. The sun beat down. Insects were droning in the little belt of brambles, rowans, and silver birch saplings to their left. Bond's gaze shifted from the lean, intent figure of the Chief of Staff to the putting green a quarter of a mile away. The famous ancient oak by the 18th green of the old course, the motionless line of parked cars. Was this the right sort of life? An unexacting game of golf with a friend to be followed in due time by a leisurely drive back to London, avoiding the M4, a light dinner alone in the flat, a few hands of piquet with another friend, 016 of Station B, home from West Berlin on 10 days leave, and bed at 11:30. So we know Bond's bedtime. That's nice to know. It was certainly a far more sensible and grown-up routine than the round of gin and tranquilizers he'd been trapped in only a couple of years before his nightmare odyssey through Japan and the USSR. He should be patting himself on the back for having come through that sticky patch. And yet, ... With the sound of a plunging sabre, Bill Tanner's driver flashed through the still warm air, and his ball, after seeming to pass out of existence for an instant, reappeared on its soaring arc, a beautiful tall shot sufficiently drawn to take him well to the left of the clump of Scotch pines that had brought many a promising score to grief at the last minute. As things stood, he had only to halve the hole to win. "It looks like your fiver, I'm sorry to say, Bill." Bill responded, "About time I took one off you." As James Bond stepped forward in his turn, the thought crossed his mind that there might be a worse sin than the cardinal one of boredom, complacency, satisfaction with the second rate, going soft without knowing it. So, how do you feel about that?
That's a lovely little passage, I think. First of all, like I mentioned, the fact that he's with Tanner, it's really nice. And I like, it's sort of setting the tone. You can see he's enjoying life. The description is good, but what is really good about this is he's questioning that, and it's following on from Man with Golden Gun, but you know that he's had like the bullet in him. He's had his injury, and from this, it kind of sort of saying that he hasn't been back on the field proper since. Yeah, and it's starting to come onto his mind now, I think. And is he enjoying life a little bit too much, or take,
Well, that's it. It does reference, doesn't it, like a couple of missions that he'd been on in the last year that just sort of like fell apart before they even started, and like it didn't even get going, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like full started missions kind of thing. Yeah. And it's kind of funny, isn't it? Because it's like, if you think about how we've had all of these Fleming Bond books leading up to this point, it's like this has got to be an older Bond who's kind of like more advanced in his career. He's a veteran. And, he's been out of the game for a little while. His last mission didn't go spectacularly well, or the last two, you know what I mean, with what happened in You Live Twice, what happens in The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's that same thing as Fleming. Like when I read Matthew Parker's Goldeneye book, the way he kind of does a lot of that is he'll take one of the Fleming stories and then write about what was happening in Fleming's life at the time and then kind of compare the two. And there's like a definite link between the older Bond gets throughout the stories, the more sort of depressive he gets kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? He gets a bit more melancholy, which is precisely what was going on in Fleming's life. He was getting more and more miserable as time was going on, and especially as his kind of health was starting to fail him and stuff. So I feel like that's the same sort of trajectory. Bond's a bit sort of knackered after his last mission, and he's sort of questioning that soft life, the sort of, I suppose, the temptation to sort of put his feet up a bit versus the excitement and the thrills and all that kind of stuff.
And it's getting into routine as well, isn't it? Which he's probably a bit frightened of, going to bed at the same time, playing golf at the same time each week, or cards, meeting up basically doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And that for a man of Bond has got to be frightening, really.
Well, that's it. He always says that, isn't he? He's like, you should never take the same route when you go to the irregular places and never mix up the times and all that kind of business. So that's a good point. And especially because somebody is scoping him out. He's fallen into this routine, and he's allowed himself to fall in under the watchful gaze of the baddies.
And it's not 016, is it? 0016.
No. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's basically 016 from Station B. So that's he's not a 00. So what is he? A single O? Do you have a single O section? I don't know. But there we go. So we have the man in sunglasses kind of scoping him out. And what I kind of like about this is like how a lot of this Bond is completely oblivious to. So it's like, usually Bond's in a position of power, especially in the movies. He's in a position of strength and everybody else is weaker. Whereas at this point, somebody's scoping him out. Bond doesn't even notice. He has got soft basically at this point. And then we get a little kind of backstory between like what M's been up to. He's been ill with a bad cough. Moneypenny had found him sprawling out across his desk, struggling to breathe. So he's on leave to get well, and kind of Bond visits him every week after his golf game with Bill. So it's kind of like, he has definitely fallen into that kind of normal kind of life. And what's cool about this kind of first bit is as he leaves to go and visit M, basically you hear this guy who's kind of sitting in a car and he's tailing Bond through, and again Bond doesn't notice it even once, and it shows kind of like how elite these people who are tailing him are, which is great because again you put Bond in peril, it raises the stakes a little bit. So there's this little sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the film, I know it doesn't happen a lot, but it does remind me a bit of From Russia with Love when with Red Grant on the train, when Bond sort of steps off the train and he's being watched every moment by Grant and he doesn't know Grant is there. That's one of the few times in the film where you can see he has no idea what's going on and the baddie's kind of scoping him out. In fact, for quite a bit of that film, Grant's sort of keeping an eye on him and Bond doesn't know. Yeah. So it would be nice actually to have something like that in a new Bond film, wouldn't it? Just to see that again, maybe even Mr. Hinx keeping an eye on Bond and Bond not knowing. I mean, that works quite well. I think it's a good sort of idea.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, actually. I think, like, especially with From Russia with Love, in the sense that Grant is built up so much from the very beginning to be like a double hard bastard. And then when he finally kind of gets with Bond, he has the upper hand throughout the whole thing. And with the gypsy camp shooting the guy that was about to kill Bond and all that kind of stuff, like he's in control, which I think is a great way to like introduce the villains. Anyway, so as kind of like Bond's driving along, he's got on his way to M's place and he's kind of like thinking about how England's changing and all these kind of new housing developments coming up and all that kind of stuff. And then this car, Zephyr, is kind of behind him. So Bond's sort of having a little think and reflect. It says, these thoughts ran into Bond's head as he carried out almost mechanically all the minute drills of good driving, including, of course, an occasional glance at his rearview mirror. Not once did the Zephyr appear there. Bond would have paid no particular attention if it did. He had never seen it before, would not have recognised its driver, even if brought face to face with him. Although he had been under close surveillance for over 6 weeks, Bond had noticed nothing out of the ordinary. So that's cool, isn't it? That's like... Yeah. Usually Bond's, he's doing his thing where he's doubling back on streets and stopping and looking in shop windows to see people tailing him. There's absolutely none of that at this point, which I think is a nice thing. So all in all, like so far through chapter 1, how do you feel?
I mean, I think chapter 1's perfect, really, because you're getting back into Bond, reintroduce him. You're seeing him in a place where he doesn't really want to be. You've got a great intro of the character of sort of the bad guy that Bond doesn't know about. So you know that he's in trouble, even though he thinks that it's the opposite. He thinks he's completely safe just playing a normal game of golf. Doesn't know that this other guy's sort of watching him. The other guy's a professional, so it's going to be sort of tough going in the chapters to come. But yeah, no, I really liked it. I thought it was great. Great first chapter, really.
Very nice, cool. And just to top off that first chapter, as he arrives at M's place, you've got this little section which I'll read. Every house has its own normally imperceptible background noise. Compounded, it may be of distant voices, footfalls, kitchen sounds, all the muted bustle of human beings about their business. James Bond was hardly across the threshold when his trained senses warned him of the total absence of any such noise. Suddenly taut, he pushed open the solid Spanish mahogany door of the study where M habitually received company. The empty room gazed obliquely at Bond. As always, everything was meticulously in its place. The lines of naval prints exactly horizontal on the walls, watercolour materials laid out as if for inspection on the painting table up against the window. It all had a weirdly artificial, detached air, like part of a museum where the furniture and effects of some historic figure had preserved just as they were in his lifetime. Before Bond could do more than look, listen and wonder, the door of the dining room across the hall, which had been standing ajar, was thrown briskly open and a man emerged. Pointing a long-barreled automatic in the direction of Bond's knees, he said in a clear voice, "Stay right there, Bond, and don't make any sudden movements. If you do, I shall maim you very painfully." So that's the end of chapter 1. Already, I think, like you say, I think that's the perfect opening chapter, because what we've got is we've been caught up with all the supporting characters. We know what they're up to. We know where Bond is, what he's been doing, the history of how he's been since the last year. We've got some tension and peril. He's being followed. And then to end the chapter, we know M's in jeopardy as well. So it's like, if you need to tick some boxes to get some, a little bit of peril on the go, he's done it perfectly, I reckon.
Yeah, I think it's good. And the fact that Bond is unaware that all this is going on, I think relates to that he's not on a mission. He's back home. And when he is on a mission, that's when he does the tailing back, the doubling back, the checking. He just doesn't think anything like this is going to happen this close to home, although perhaps he should do. But yeah, great. And also, it's personal, isn't it? It's something's happening to M, or at least something might be happening to M. He knows something's not right. This guy's at M's house, and it's not just some random guy. This is the head of MI6. So
the boss. Yeah.
The boss,
absolutely.
Indeed.
So one more thing which we don't find out until chapter 2 is the Hammonds, who's like Bond's housekeeper and kind of butler guy, I suppose, Mr. and Mrs. Hammond, who featured throughout the Fleming books. They've both been killed. So that's like landmark characters that we'd all know, who've been dispatched kind of straight away within the first couple of chapters. So that's an interesting point of note to be made as well, I think.
Definitely.
Okay, so rather than kind of go through chapter by chapter, which would take bloody ages, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like break down the book into kind of sections. So I guess like the first thing is kind of talking, which we kind of already have mentioned really, is the kind of the setting, kind of where Bond is and all that kind of stuff, and where all the characters are in the world. So, we've got an experienced kind of veteran Bond. We've got M, who's a bit sick and poorly, who's kind of on leave. And we've got Tanner there. And, like we said, we've got a Bond who's kind of a bit damaged and kind of messed up and worrying about the soft life, as he puts it. So in terms of actually like the locations in this book, we've got England, obviously, the English countryside with the golf game and all that kind of stuff. And we've got Greece. So what are your thoughts on that?
Greece is good because obviously it hasn't been, like Kingsley said, it hadn't been visited really much in the literature before. So I think that was great. Initially, when I was reading it, I was almost a bit like, oh, there's only sort of 2 locations. because I'm kind of used to seeing Bond in the films going here, there, and everywhere. But it actually works quite well, I think. You can't really have him travel to 8 different countries in the book. Well, you can, but I don't think it would work as well. And it means you're getting a lot more out of the locations if you're there for a longer amount of time. And obviously, Kingsley Amis said he went there on holiday, so he's taken in some of the famous sites, the Parthenon and Acropolis and everything. But then you're building in the sort of culture and the descriptions along with it. And I think Greece is a cool location for Bond because it is sort of one of those luxury places where you imagine it to be nice sea, nice weather, but it's also got a bit of a history of the underworld, in terms of like a bit of a criminal background within its history, and I think that definitely adds something for Bond.
Definitely, I think it's a perfect location. It's kind of like when you look at Rome in Spectre, and you're like, I can't believe Bond's never been there before. It's like it just feels like such a Bond location. And obviously, Bond goes there in For Your Eyes Only, the film version, obviously. But it is funny that Fleming never used it up until that point. So it's interesting. And I think like you've got the two differences, haven't you? When he shows up in Athens and you've got the Acropolis and all those kind of iconic sort of places he visits. And then you've got all the little islands as well, which is really nice. And it reminds me, like, this to me feels like those old school Fleming stories like Dr. No and Live and Let Die, where it's like he's operating amongst little islands. There's the little boat trip and all that kind of stuff, like with Quarrel. There's that guy Litzas who's kind of like the Quarrel role in this book and all that kind of stuff. I think that it just feels like classic kind of Fleming Bond. And you don't see, you don't see the Daniel Craig Bond sort of doing those kind of adventures these days. I feel like it's like an old school adventure story. It's how it feels. Yeah.
And I like it when Bond's close to the sea, and like you mentioned, like with the island hopping, because it, however, sort of, whatever the story is, when he's kind of on an island or close to the sea, it is connecting him to his naval background, and you can tell he's comfortable with the sea. I think he'd never be able to live landlocked, Bond. He's too, the sea is too much to him, and I think it really suits him. And I do like the idea of him sort of going by boat or snorkeling or diving or swimming, in these sort of settings. And I think that's good. And it makes me want to go to these islands and like go and swim and dive underwater and then pretend I'm Bond looking for some underwater cave or, something like that. Yeah. And it's nice. It's just escapism, isn't it? It's good escapism.
That's totally what it is. And again, I suppose they always said that what made Bond so popular is in those days in the 60s is like people didn't travel as much as they do now. So it was like, seeing all these far away locations was the only way they would usually see them. So I feel like there's a little bit of that in this as well, being, coming out in 68. So there's this little bit as well I noticed when they're kind of on the boat on the way to Vrakanisi, the kind of little island where all the action happens, that just to me just stinks of Fleming in a good way. So let me just read
and
this little part.
It's a fictional island, isn't it?
It is, yeah. He kind of made it up, but there we go. So he said, so this is Bond on the boat with Ariadne, the Bond girl, who we'll talk about in a bit. And she says, they'll tell you that's just a mythical story of what happened when the island was formed as it is today. A volcano was erupting and pouring down burning lava, and at last it exploded and the sea rushed in. But I'd as soon believe in the dragon. Vrakanisi, they'll tell you, it means just rocky island. Not exciting. But that ought to be Vrakonisi with the letter Chi, K-H-I it's spelled. I don't know how you pronounce it. What it must really be is Thrakonisi, Dragon Island. Now, that feels like a Fleming backstory perfectly, doesn't it? With all this sort of like superstitious stuff that he would kind of like put in, like, with the dragons and Dr. No Crab Key and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
That Dragon Island, man, that sounds like an old school. I could see Quarrel on his little boat heading to Dragon Island. You know what I mean?
Well, if Crab Key wasn't called Crab Key, that's what it would be called, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, completely. So there we go. So in terms of the actual kind of plot, so the bad guys, there's basically a Russian conference, and Colonel Sun and his red Chinese cronies are basically planning to mortar attack it from the water and then frame Bond and M as being behind that attack. So how do you feel about that plan?
Yeah, no, it's good. It sort of rings from Russia a little bit with the whole setup. When Spectre were kind of setting up MI6 and Smersh against one another, with Electric Decoder in the film, and in the book as well. It's got hints of that, with Colonel's son and his sort of gang setting up sort of Russia and Britain and playing them off one another. They're basically trying to get the Russians to take out the British and vice versa. And but also, obviously, if they use Bond and M's bodies, then it'll be humiliating for the British as well. So I think that's good. It's twisted, isn't it? It's a twisted plot. But what I think brings it out even more is the role that Sun plays in it, and he's behind this idea, but he's also got something like his own sort of personal thing that he likes to do as well, which is almost, he'd almost do anything to get a chance to basically do a
bit of naughty torture, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose it's like when you compare it to Spectre's usual plan of playing two nations off against each other to spark a conflict. Like we've said before, that's usually Spectre's main sort of hobby. It's that story again, isn't it? It's Elliot Carver, sparking World War III as a third party, and that's precisely what Colonel Sun's trying to do here. Now, I suppose
Blofeld with America and Russia as well.
There you go. Exactly. It's across the board. So it is like the classic Spectre plan, but obviously there's no Spectre involved this time around. And I feel like when you compare it to kind of real life stuff, that stuff, I'm reasonably sure that kind of activity goes on to this very day. There's I'm not that educated on the topic, but there's the Bay of Tonkin thing, which apparently sparked off the Vietnam War. There's loads of people saying that what that actual event was never actually happened, and it was just a way to start a war or whatever. So I feel like, that kind of thing does happen in real life. You don't usually, well, I say that, I was saying you don't usually get like a madman who tries to start a master race of people in space, but you had Adolf Hitler, who was pretty much along those lines, just without the outer space bit. So I guess it follows those lines, doesn't it, of pushing the boundaries of reality but not going beyond them. Do you know what I mean? And I think this is something that would probably happen quite easily in this day and age, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And the sort of the military aspect is quite interesting as well. Obviously, they're using this mortar bomb to disrupt and obviously attack this Russian conference. And that mortar bomb itself is a British bomb. They're going to make sure that it looks like Britain was the country involved that actually bombed the place. So it's conniving, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
And ultimately they want to get out of it as these two sort of at war, and that's basically their gain, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, totally. But I mean, when you look at it, I suppose it is a pretty down to earth plot, isn't it? It's not, you're not going to see any hollowed out volcanoes.
Fantasy, is it?
No, it's pretty straightforward. A mortar attack on a Russian meeting. So there it is. Cool. So let's talk about James Bond himself. Do you feel like he feels like the same Bond as Fleming? Do you feel like he's maybe a different Bond than Fleming's Bond, the Kingsley Amis Bond, or do you think he's more like the Bond of the films? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think he's obviously very akin to the Fleming Bond. I mean, the way I definitely get a Fleming feel when I read it. But you can tell he's that little bit older. It is just a continuation of the Fleming Bond. That's kind of the feel that I got. In terms of visually, when I'm picturing the Bond, it was a cross between, the Titan comic book adaptations.
Yeah.
It was kind of, that was the sort of Bond I had in mind, kind of Connery-esque, really. It was basically Connery. It's a cross between sort of Connery and the Titan book drawing of Bond. That's who I had in mind. I definitely didn't have any of the other cinematic Bonds. It would have possibly been Connery, but more like the Titan Bond almost. So that was kind of interesting.
How I feel about this is I feel like Fleming could have written this book. Like I don't. If again I didn't know any better, and I read 4 or 5 books, 4 by Fleming and 1 by Kingsley. I don't think I'd be able to tell the difference. Like, I think he's that close in Fleming's style. And as somebody who wasn't like as well versed in the world of espionage and all that kind of stuff, I mean, to me, he's done a bang up job and he's really kind of nailed it. And the other thing as well is a lot of the times when you read Bond, sometimes you think, oh, Bond wouldn't say that, or Bond wouldn't do that, or that, you know, that's like with some of the John Gardner's Bonds, it's a big sort of jarring change, because it's like, you know, it feels like a Roger Moore movie, and you know that's obviously what he was going for, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different, you know. And I think with this, if you're a fan of those original Fleming books and that original Fleming character, he's got it on the nose. And everything that Bond says feels like something Fleming would have written. Everything that Bond does feels like something Fleming would have written. So yeah, I think it's bang on. And in terms of who I pictured, I feel like I have, when I read Fleming, I have a picture in my mind of what Bond looks like, and it's not any of the actors, and that's again who I picture here in this. You know, I don't picture. I suppose the closest one I would picture would be Connery. Other than that, that's it for me. But
and so visually, is it similar to any picture you've seen before?
No, I can't really. It's almost like I picture him, but I almost can't see his face. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's quite funny, isn't it?
It is funny, but there was that thing. So in the introduction, he was saying about how he, gave Bond gadgets that he never actually uses, and he relies on his wit and his ingenuity. Yeah. And that's what I like about the film Dr. No and those earlier movies, is the fact he pulls his hair out and puts it across the wardrobe door and all that kind of stuff, rather than some mobile phone that does all these crazy things. But anyway, I thought I'd just read that section quickly. So he's just arrived in Athens. A packet containing the midget transmitter had been awaiting Bond when he checked in at the hotel, and he had duly installed it in the compartment Q Branch had made for it in the heel of his left shoe. Bit of Goldfinger for us there. A miniature picklock was fitted into the right heel, and two wafer-thin tungsten steel hacksaw blades, hardly less pliable than the cloth itself, in the lapels of his charcoal green mohair suit. Such devices grew more sophisticated every year. Their possible hiding places remained constant. Men like the ones who had planned and carried out the quarterdeck operation would be unlikely to overlook any of them. Bond realized grimly that on this assignment, as on all of his previous ones, the tools he basically had to depend on were invisible, intangible within himself. They would be tested to the utmost by what lay ahead. Everything else was uncertain. So that's cool, isn't it? It's basically saying, like, I've got all these cool tools, but, I'm going to be searched. They're going to find him. So I can't rely on these. I've got to rely on my wit, which I think is Fleming's Bond to a T.
Definitely. I think it's almost a little bit anti-establishment as well, isn't it? Which is Fleming's Bond as well. It's almost like I can sort myself out, If I really need the help, I'll do it. But I can sort of. It's a little bit of egotistical, but in a good way, if you know what I mean. You need that sort of confidence in one's ability, don't you? Yeah,
absolutely.
Which Bond has.
So yeah, absolutely. So moving on, we've got the villain, Colonel Sun himself, and I thought there was a really cool description of him actually, which I'm just going to read for you now, which goes like this. He was tall for a Chinese, nearly 6 foot, one of the northern types akin to the Kamba Tibetan, big-boned and long-headed. But the skin colour was the familiar flat light yellow, the hair blue-black and dead straight, the epicanthic eye fold notably conspicuous. It was only when you looked Sun straight in the eyes that he seemed less than totally Chinese. The irises were of an unusual and very beautiful pewter-like grey, like the eyes of the newborn, the legacy perhaps of some medieval invader from Kyrgyz or Nayman. But then not many people did look Sun straight in the eyes. Not twice, anyway. Now that
I like that.
Is a bloody description of a Bond villain, if you ask me, don't you think?
Definitely. It's funny, actually. When I was reading Colonel Sun, the villain that I kind of pictured him as was almost Dr. No-like. Because, Dr. No has that ancestry. He's quite tall. He's got the dark hair. He's got the the eyes, similar eyes, and whenever I pictured Colonel Sun moving, walking, or standing, or anything like that, it was very much like the Dr. No from the film. which I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? 'Cause there's that thing with some Bond villains where they have like an economy of movement. Doctor No's one of them. Hugo Drax is another one where they don't move all that much. Every movement is very slow and considered and sort of definite. And I think he's one of those, because there's that bit, isn't it, where some of his cronies come back and sort of report on how the kidnap of M went and all that kind of stuff, and they start talking about what he deems to be insignificant details, and every time they mention something, he just says, he brings his hand up like that to signal that he's not interested, he doesn't want to hear it, just tell me what I need to know, and all that. And I think I know what you mean. I kind of, that scene of Dr. No sitting at the table, he's very sort of straight backed, very stiff and very deadpan. I feel like Colonel Sun would be one of those. I feel like. Yeah,
I think so. Did you picture Colonel Sun? Was he similar to the person on the cover, or was it someone completely different? Or
yeah, I guess more or less the same. Yeah, I mean, like if I hold that up to the camera, you can kind of see. Yeah. I would picture him maybe a bit more gaunt. That guy looks like he's got a bit of body fat on him. I would picture Colonel Sun to be a lot skinnier. And yeah, much like, Dr. No of the movie, I think. But yeah, good call. Now, the interesting thing about Colonel Sun is he's obviously like a crazed lunatic who's, there's that whole section about him being a sadist and all that kind of stuff and the torture. Yet he's very polite and nice, isn't he? Like when he first speaks to M after he arrives, he's like, "How are you feeling, sir?" Calls him sir, and and there's that bit where he offers him an omelette and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it's like a bit of a weird playoff between the two, isn't it?
Well, it's kind of like he'll offer him a fine meal and a glass of nice wine, but then he'll talk about torturing him, a minute later. And it is strange. I guess it's almost a prelude to some of the film villains where Bond is wined and dined. Obviously, he is in Dr. No anyway, but I think, maybe that adds to him though, doesn't it? It adds to Colonel Sun that he is just so polite because what's going to happen, and he's obviously kidnapped this person, but yeah, he's trying to not win him over, but just, I suppose, if he is polite, it makes it easier for him because the captives will be less aggressive, perhaps.
Well, there's that bit, isn't there, like in the torture scene, which we'll talk about in a bit, like he doesn't want Bond harmed at all before he does it. So it's like he wants Bond to be absolutely like a clean slate. So all the pain he feels is from his torture. So I guess maybe that's his angle, is like he likes to feed them up and make them comfortable. So when he tortures them, it'll be extra painful and
that's stark. Definitely it. Yeah, I like that. That's definitely the way. Yeah. That's
So he's a nasty bastard is what he is. And there's also you probably noticed just a little sliver of the kind of the old school Fleming racism, which he's kind of thrown in there, which again is a product of its time. Where if you remember the scene where Colonel Sun's talking to M when he first arrives in his little house on the island, M says, "I shan't be answering any of your questions, you yellow-faced bandit. So I might as well make a start by not answering that one. Save your breath." Which I like it because it's like, I imagine M is like a bulldog. He's not messing around. He's not going to kind of reveal any details and all that kind of stuff. I imagine that's how M would respond in a situation like that. And yeah, it's that old love it or hate it. That kind of angle is an integral part of Fleming's writing. So to have it in there makes it feel more authentic. How do you feel?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, obviously, time and for its time, it's part of the how things perhaps were back then. But no, it definitely has a Fleming feel to it. And yeah, I mean, it just like you said, it kind of makes it more sort of Fleming authentic in a way.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, if it wasn't that, it'd be something even worse in terms of a name calling, even if it wasn't sort of racist related from being in that position that M was, I guess. So.
Absolutely. Good stuff. And so next up then, it's time to talk about the Bongo, Ariadne Alexandru.
Nice.
So the kind of opening sort of description of her was she was young, a strikingly I've just written it slightly wrong. She was young, strikingly pretty, with the delicate features, full breast, and tobacco blonde hair of the most attractive physical type in this region. So one of the things Fleming always does, as we mentioned before, is he likes to talk about the boobs a lot, doesn't he? So we've had the mention of the boobs. That's something to tick off the list, which is great. And then how do you feel about Ariadne, generally speaking?
Well, just going on that description, I thought it was quite interesting that they related tobacco blonde hair. Now, normally that some people think, oh, the hair's a bit smelly or a bit dirty, but obviously tobacco was something that Fleming was into, and perhaps Kingsley Amis as well. So it's sort of related to it being nice.
Yeah.
No, but I think she's great, Ariadne. She's a tough girl. She's a tough cookie. When you first meet her, you don't quite know how her and Bond are going to get on. Is she good? Is she bad? Is she sort of... You're never quite sure what she's thinking. But then something happens and she just shows all of her intelligence, her strength, her sort of bravery, all within this one scene. And I think, great intro for a Bond girl. Yeah,
so I mean, so the kind of the whole thing is like when Bond arrives in Greece, there's that sort of like he doesn't know what he's doing. He gets there and he's like, I've just got to wait for something to happen. And she's been sent by the Russians, and basically there's her boss Gordienko, who kind of thinks that Bond's there to disrupt. He thinks, Bond is there to disrupt the kind of the conference or the meeting they have there, and she's sent to kind of intercept him and bring him into their hands. And there's that scene, isn't there, where like the two dudes show up to fight him, but she realizes they're not the two people she was expecting. And then there's that kind of whole bit where Bond's on the floor and she's like hitting him and spitting on him and stuff. But instead of
shouting at him.
Yeah, shouting at him, but she switches to English and is like, you take the fat one and I'll take the skinny one. Like that. So they still think that she's beating him up when really they're working together. So she's got a bit of ingenuity there. She knows how to kind of handle herself in a crisis. And then after they dispatch the two thugs, they kind of escape. And she's kind of leading the way. She's like pulling him through the crowd. Bond is firmly in her hands and she's taking charge, which I think, which is cool. And it's like, the Bond girls we all love and like are the ones who've got a bit of balls and a bit of spunk in them. The Vespers, the Tracys, the ones that can kind of handle themselves a bit. And I think she fits into that mold nicely.
She does. She's good. And that basically without her, Bond would be up shit creek where he is, because he doesn't know it. That's the other kind of strange thing about this. He's almost sent on a mission, but doesn't quite know ultimately what's going to happen. All he knows is that he's got to go to this place, and if he just hangs around, something will happen because he knows it's almost a trap, and people will be watching him. So he's going in pretty much blind into this mission, and fortunately for him, Ariadne is, she obviously knows the way of the land. She's connected, like you said, with the Russians. And she pretty much saves him when he first gets there. Great Bond girl material.
Absolutely. Now there's another little passage that I thought I'd read out as well, which is the typical Bond love scene that kind of tickled me a little bit. So I thought I'd read it. So basically, after they've kind of escaped the safe house, and there's a little gunfight in their escape, they get to another safe house. Ariadne smiled a calm, self-possessed, sensual smile. Then her sherry-coloured eyes never leaving Bond's face, she stripped naked, unhurriedly, but without coquetry or exhibitionism, her movements and expressions showing an absolute certainty that he would find her beautiful. She had a truly magnificent body, magnificent abdomen, slender but rounded, longer in the leg than is common with Greek girls, the breasts deep yet youthfully taut, the belly slightly protuberant with a soft honey-blonde triangle at its base. She narrowed her gaze now, and her lips parted. Now, the next line actually made me laugh when I read it. There was nothing leisurely about Bond's undressing. And so I kind of picture there she is, this beautiful creature undressing in front of him, all kind of all nicely, and then Bond just leaping into action, ripping off his clothes immediately and getting the job done. I liked it.
That's quite amusing.
Yeah, and again, that sounds like a Fleming description of a naked lady, doesn't it? We got some boobs in there, we got some punani this time as well, which is a nice little bonus. So there we go. Cool. So that's Ariadne. So I rank her as a really solid Bond girl. She's not a pushover. She's not a Mary Goodnight. Do you know what I mean? She gets the job done, which is cool.
Definitely. She's good.
So then next up, we got like the supporting characters. We've got Gordienko, which is Ariadne's boss, and he's kind of like, he's almost like, there's that great scene, isn't there, where they have the meeting, and then Bond's assuming that Gordienko has M. Gordienko's assuming Bond's attacking this conference or here to do that, and then neither of them realize what the hell they're talking about. So that's kind of an interesting kind of little sequence. We've got Nico Litzas, who's like the Quarrel, who they get the boat from, and he kind of navigates and all that kind of stuff. And he's got his little ship's boy Yanni. And like, for me, again, they all fit. It's almost as if Fleming could have written those characters. They're bang on as far as I'm concerned in the roles they play. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, no, I definitely would. They're all sort of rounded. They've all got, things like looking at Nico, you can tell he's quite charming, and he reminds me a bit of Columbo from For Your Eyes Only. He's very much, you can tell him and Bond would get on pretty much straight away. They've both got the sort of sailing background. He's a bit of a rough diamond himself, Nico, I'd imagine, but you can tell he'll be a really good ally to have.
Yeah.
Gordienko was interesting because it's that sort of thing where you think, oh, okay, this is going to be one of the main bad guys against Bond, and then they both think that, and then obviously they find out that they're both being played, which then sort of makes them allies, along with Ariadne sort of being their go-between. And you think that's going to be sort of a long-term thing, but then they get Gordienko they get attacked, don't they? Really,
absolutely,
in a pretty good scene.
I think like there's some good backstory with him as well, isn't there? Because with the kind of the henchman, you've got von Richter who shows up, who's cool in the sense that he's got that typical Fleming villain disability, hasn't he? The deformity, that's the word I was looking for. Like where by it like was it not a gunshot, was it, or was it an explosion or something? I think it was an explosion.
Some sort of explosion
that kind of messed up his hair like above his ear, and his flesh is all scarred and all that kind of stuff. And he's known as the Butcher of Capuzona, who during the war came and just butchered loads of innocent people, and that directly relates to Litzas, who has a bit of a vendetta against him. Be like Kerim Bey in From Russia with Love. There's that whole kind of rivalry thing going on, which I think is great, and tying it back to the war like that is a really nice touch. I thought it just kind of raises the stakes a little bit, and of course you've got De Graaf as well, who's kind of one of the henchmen from the beginning, who kills the Hammonds and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like again, like the cast of characters are bang on. Like sometimes you find with books there's sometimes too many characters to keep track of, but with this one I think there's just the right amount, and they've all got a decent backstory. There's depth to them. They're not just these hollow kind of characters that just come out of nowhere who, sometimes it can be a bit cartoon-like, can't it, with some thrillers? Whereas I love the fact that, like I say, it's tied back into the war. There's all these kind of links that make you hate those characters. The Butcher of Capuzona, you got De Graaf, who kills the Hammonds, who are characters that we know and love throughout the years of reading these books. So you want them all to die. Do you know what I mean? You want them all to get their comeuppance, which is good.
No, definitely, and I think it's nice that it's not just one sort of group. The fact that we've got the sort of Russians, the British, and then this third group with Colonel Sung and his lot. It's good because it's not just one-on-one sort of thing, and there's it adds to sort of the twists and the turns, and it means that Bond's never quite sure what's happening. So he's always having to second guess what's going on, who's behind it, and ultimately how he's going to get out of it and stuff. So completely. That definitely is.
Okay, so next up, let's talk about some of like the key scenes. Now, I think the first one to talk about is what I know is one of your favourite scenes and one of mine as well, which is chapter 11 with the little boat sequence, Death by Water. Talk to me. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so this one was quite interesting. Basically, so in the boat you've got Bond, you've got Nico, you've got Ariadne, and I think Yanni's there as well. And there's another boat that comes along that's basically feigning engine trouble. So you don't quite, straight away you're thinking, okay, is this a trap? Are they trying to get, are they trying to fool Bond and co into helping them out? They're basically saying, our engine's not working, we'll need a hand or whatever. And there's a couple of real sort of interesting lines being thrown around at this point. I think, obviously, Bond, they're all a bit suspicious. Bond probably in somewhat of an interesting stance. He's almost, he's in two minds about whether to help them or not. And normally you think, well, this could be so obviously be a trap that he'd never do it. But yet,
there's that line, isn't there? So basically what happens is Litzas comes and wakes him up and says there's a boat and they've got engine trouble, and then there's this line where Bond says, I don't suppose for a moment that this lot is anything other than a boatload of the opposition, but we're not entitled to ignore the faint chance that they are what they say they are and in serious difficulty. Whatever we're up to, we're still sailors. Tell them we'll take them in tow. So like for me with this one, this is like if you're on a mission to rescue M and there's those kinds of stakes, would he bother helping just a random boat? Like, would he bother taking that risk of like, this is probably the opposition, but he's saying like his honor as a sailor, he kind of has to take him in tow. For me, I don't know whether he would actually do that or not. I don't know. What do you think?
It's for me, yeah, I agree. I think it's a little bit weak. It's almost like there could have been a much stronger excuse, perhaps. Maybe if they'd mentioned a word or something that got Bond's attention to think, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on here, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I think the whole sailor code, that's almost putting that above the MI6.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Thing.
It's like, his code as a gentleman sailor is more important than rescuing M. So, yeah, considering that, they could have disabled his boat and killed him and M would not have a rescuer, I don't know. I don't think he would have done that in all truth. But it does give us an excuse for a brilliant scene. So I'm not, I'm still happy with it.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of bit where basically, so Litzas kind of throws him a rope, pulls the boat alongside, and then Bond slips into the water, puts a pair of flippers on, takes a bag of grenades and a knife with him, and sneaks aboard their boat and kind of.
You like this bit?
Yeah, I love it. I love it when Bond sneaks, man. It's the best. And there's that kind of whole thing where, Litzas is up front talking with some of the guys, and Bond's like counting the number of people on the boat. And all that, super sneaky. And then when inevitably it does all kick off, Bond kind of like stabs the dude at the wheel of the boat like 3 times in the chest, which is really brutal. And then there's a couple of bits as well which I really like, which is he drops the grenades into the engine room of the boat, and then like as this obviously by that point there's like bullets coming whizzing his way, and it says like he knew not to stop and sort of get ready to execute a perfect dive because then he'd be a sitting target, so he just literally scrambles over the side straight into the water, which I thought was like a really cool little image of him, kind of like there he is in his little wetsuit or whatever, grenades in the thing, and then just scrambling over the side while the bullets kind of whiz over the top. I thought that was a lovely scene. Loved it.
I do. I think that's good as well, because you're always thinking of Bond doing the perfect sort of movement or looking good while he does what he, for instance, the bungee jump in GoldenEye, perfect swan dive. And I mean, Bond was right. If he did that off the boat, okay, it might be a perfect dive up until the point they get shot, and then he just would have fallen in. So the fact that he is just scrambling over, he doesn't care about anything else, it's obviously the sensible thing to do. I think that's nice. I really
very
like
nice.
It. But that whole sneaking, because basically as the boat was being sort of pulled across next to Nico's boat, they obviously don't know Bond slipped over the side, and he does a little bit where he's underwater, swims a bit underwater and pokes his head out, and yeah, it's just good. I like seeing Bond in the water, a bit of almost Thunderball style coming through there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Really I loved it. And just to hark back to Simon Godwin's question earlier, what he does, he gets back on the Altair. First thing he does is have a little ciggy.
He does.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
you know.
So I think after that sequence, which is one of my favorites, loved it, there is the torture scene, which I think is probably the most memorable scene in the book. Are you on board with that?
Yeah, no, it is for several reasons. Obviously, this is the epitome of Colonel Sun's sort of motives. You know, this guy, if he could do anything for the rest of his life, it'd be to be in a small, dingy room with another person that he could just do all manner of torture on, but not kill. Basically, try and keep him alive as long as he could, and perform all these crazy torture stuff on him.
Yeah,
and it's almost getting into the equivalent of these days, the modern version of like films like Saw and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it really
is. It's almost like that territory. But back then, no one obviously had stuff like that, and the world wasn't exposed to those sort of images or ideals or ideas. But this guy, because he's so calm and because he's so polite while he's planning to do this torture and what, you know, it just adds to that sort of
do you know what?
deviousness, I think.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Like how it almost, to use a sort of analogy that's not quite there, is like the used car salesman, that kind of that thing where they're over friendly and it gives you off a creepy vibe because you know they just want your money at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean?
That's a really good one, actually.
And I feel like this is the same sort of thing. He's so friendly because he wants you to feel so good, because then once he actually starts inflicting the pain, it's going to be even a much bigger contrast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, like, after reading the book and thinking about it a bit, I think that's perfect. That niceness, giving him the nice omelette or whatever, makes total sense when you look at it like that, I think, you know.
And exactly. And also, you mentioned about Bond. Well, there's a bit where Bond was tied up, but instead of using ropes or chains or cuffs, basically they used toweling, because obviously toweling is quite soft. And although Bond still couldn't escape, it meant that his wrists weren't chafed, because, like you said, Colonel Sun didn't want any pain on him whatsoever. He wanted him to feel as most comfortable as he could.
Yeah.
And I think that's great because, you know, again, this is obsession, isn't it? We spoke about it before. Goldfinger, obsession, gold. You know, you've got, when a villain's at its best, he's obsessed with something. And Colonel Sun's obsession is basically torture, and in a much stronger way than the whole Stamper, Dr. Kaufman idea from Tomorrow Never Dies. A bit similar to Dr. Kaufman, but played really, really well in this book.
Yeah.
You know, you can tell he goes to bed and that's what he thinks about. He wakes up in the morning, that's what he thinks about. That's pretty much on his mind, I think. 24/7, isn't it?
No, absolutely. There was because I suppose you've got to compare it to the other torture scene that's iconic in Bond, which is obviously the ball whipping in Casino Royale. And I like how that's kind of referenced. There's this little passage I'm just going to read here quickly. So at this point, Bond's tied up in the chair and Colonel Sun's kind of chatting to him before he gets down to business. Now, the all-important question of where I'm to locate my assault. The obvious, all too obvious place is the genital organs. Now, which for me, if I was in captivity, they would only have to look at my cock and balls and I would tell them whatever they wanted to know without even having to touch it. Like, that would be enough for me. You don't even touch them. I'm sure experience has taught you that tremendous pain can be inflicted upon them. So there's a nice little reference to Casino. Plus, the very valuable psychological side effect whereby the victim fears for, then laments over the loss of his manhood. But that won't affect you very much. I trust I've convinced you, James, that it's not your manhood I'm going to deprive you of, but your life. And the whole idea of a genital assault is so unsophisticated. So that's kind of cool, isn't it? Like, he's not. The obvious thing, if you want to cause a man a lot of pain, is to go for the cock and balls. And it really is. And he's sort of taking it a level above that, isn't he? He's like, he feels that's dirty. He wants to get real pain. And there's this line in there where he says he wants to attack where he actually is in his head. And he talks about, like, obviously he uses the skewers and goes in the ear and all that kind of stuff.
That's crazy, isn't it? That, straight away, like whenever you sort of, if you see a picture of someone being kicked in the balls or whatever, you know, you wince, don't you?
You do.
But reading that segment, and basically, so Bond's trapped in this sort of tiny room, and there's a table with a collection of sort of kitchen-like instruments.
Yeah.
So it's not high-tech stuff. It's not electric sort of pads or anything like this. It's literally sort of kitchen, knives and stuff like this. And Son just picks up this long metal skewer, and there's a bit where he has it close to Bond's ear, and Bond can feel the tip of the skewer just tickling the sort of outer edge of his ear canal. And then basically Colonel Son slides the skewer through his ear, and just imagining that and how much pain that would be.
Yeah.
And the way it's described in the book is brilliant, because Bond is almost passing out and well, he does eventually pass out, but the way that it's described, you can almost feel it, can't you?
Yeah.
It's sore.
It's nasty, isn't it? Do you know, it's weird, isn't it? I remember when I was a kid, I used to work in a chip shop, and my boss had flown planes before, and he was sort of like an amateur pilot. And he told me once years ago when he was young, he had some sort of ear infection that he wasn't aware of, and when he took off, his eardrums burst. And he said it was he said it was the most painful thing he's ever been through, because not only is it like a part of your body that's been hurt, it's like it affects everything. It's like your sense of balance. He said like every time he took a step, it was like this lightning bolt of pain through his head, and all that kind of stuff. So I imagine, like a knitting needle in the eardrum is kind of fucking hurt, isn't it?
It's not going to be good.
No, absolutely not. So for me, I always remember when I read that as a kid, that torture scene stayed with me. It really did, and I think that's really up there as one of the all-time classic Bond scenes, the literary scenes, Fleming included or not. I think that's right up there. And again, it's almost the payoff. You've had that build up of Colonel, like for example, from Rush with Love, you get all this build up with Red Grant of what a machine he is, and then you have the train fight as the payoff. And I feel like this torture scene is the Colonel Son payoff, where you really see him in his kind of glory, if that's the right word. For that kind of torture scene, which is cool. I love it. It's nasty, but I love it.
Yeah. I think he's probably, well, he is well, he is a classic villain. It's for anyone that hasn't sort of read it, he really is a classic Bond villain, I think. And I know we're sort of coming towards this later on, but I can see stuff from Colonel Son that could be utilised in a film
definitely
way.
Definitely.
But,
so we'll talk about kind of like a potential Colonel Son film in a bit. But before we do, there's the actual kind of death of Colonel Son. I feel like the way a villain is dispatched is an important kind of thing to sort of talk about. So basically what happens with that torture scene is one of the kind of the girls, like the prostitute girls that Colonel Son has on the island, kind of like loosens Bond's ropes or the toweling, and helps him, and Bond kind of stabs Colonel Son and messes him up, but doesn't actually kill him.
Is that a mistake?
Well, obviously, in history, when you're dispatching a villain, you must always check that you've actually killed them, because they do have a history of coming back. But he does the heroic thing, goes and rescues everybody, unties M and Ariadne and all that kind of stuff. And by the time he gets back, the girl who helped him is dead, and the Dr. Lohman, is all kind of stabbed up. And there's that cool thing where they talk about superhuman vitality, I think they call it, whereby the doctor basically says like those wounds would have killed any man, but he's like beyond that. He's like superhuman almost. And then so Bond kind of goes after him, and basically what's happened is Colonel Son's kind of like stabbed up the doctor, like in a fury, stabbed up the girl, and he's gone. So when Bond catches up with him, I think this is like a cool balance between the kind of the sort of pushing Bond to its limits in terms of reality and keeping it under control as well. Because when he sees Colonel Son outside, Colonel Son kind of says like he's gonna die, like he's still alive, but he's on his way out. Like it's not like he's like done and he's back to normal. He's proper messed up, and he's got his mortar, like a mortar bomb, and he's like, I'm just gonna drop this and I'm gonna kill us both, Bond. And there's like a little bit of a standoff, and then Bond kind of jumps over the wall. Colonel Son kind of chucks it misses Bond, it blows up. Then Bond comes back around with a knife and kind of stabs him in cold blood, and that's like the actual final end of Colonel Son. So how do you feel like that as a dispatching for the villain?
Well, I guess it's good because he's face to face, he's eye to eye with this guy. I guess the fact that he's stabbing him is almost payback for the skewer. I know it's not in his ear, but it's a similar sort of thing. So that's kind of good. Part of me initially thought, could there be could he be, hoist by his own petard? Could he potentially have succumbed to some torture device or something like that? And part of me was considering that as a potential death.
Yeah, it's a funny one, that isn't it? Like we've talked about that in some of the film reviews, isn't it? Like when we did the villains episodes, it's like almost like, for example, when he gets rid of Jaws, it's with that giant magnet. Do you know what I mean? When he gets rid of Teehee, it's by his arm that kind of causes that to happen, and all that kind of stuff. An odd job, obviously. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I suppose if you do that every time, it becomes expected and a bit cliche. But I kind of almost wanted Bond to get one of them knitting needles and stick it in Colonel Sun's ear, and that would have been his end. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I feel like for somebody such a brutal character as Colonel Sun, he should have had a slightly more brutal ending himself, I think.
No, I think so. I think he almost got off a little bit lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. But there we go. So there's that whole kind of thing, kind of wrapped up nice and neatly. And then, so what I thought is also quite an interesting thing is the kind of like how we leave Bond at the end of the book. Because do you remember, like when you watched the old Incredible Hulk series on the TV, there was always that thing where Bruce Banner would make friends and then he would have to walk on because he was the Hulk and he couldn't be around people he loved and all that kind of stuff. And I think we get a bit of that at the end of this. So like the last kind of paragraph of the book, after everything's kind of wrapped up. As 5 minutes later, they walked along the side of the square with the evening bustle of Athens around them, Bond said, "Come to London with me, Ariadne, just for a little while. I know they'll give you leave. I want to come with you, just as you don't want to go, but I can't. I knew you'd ask me, and I was all set to say yes. Then I saw it somehow wouldn't be right. I think old Orensky was right about one thing when he said I was bourgeois. I'm still stuck with my middle-class respectability. Does that sound silly? No, but it makes me feel sad. Me too. It all comes from our job. People think it must be wonderful and free and everything, but we're not free, are we? No, said Bond again, we're prisoners, but let's enjoy our captivity while we can. So that reminds me of the closing chapter of closing page of Solo when he kind of leaves that woman's house and kind of disappears off into the night. It's that same reminder that Bond always has to be that solitary figure. You know what I mean? He's never going to settle down with a woman. He's got to be on the move all the time. And there we have it. That's the final words of Colonel Sun. So, Chris, how do you feel about it?
Well, like I said, I hadn't read it before, so it was definitely an interesting experience. Overall, I think for me, it did the job. It definitely did the job. I thought its strengths were the fact that it was so Fleming-like that it was almost Fleming. I thought the description was great. The character of Bond was good. I thought the villain was immense. It's kind of strange because you get the intro to him at the start and the build up, and then he kind of disappears for a while you stay with Bond, and then when he comes back again, it really sort of goes all out then. So he was great, and the other supporting characters were good. The setting was good. I think the only things for me which perhaps I might have changed, like you, I think the death. Perhaps if it had been some sort of torture death, it probably would have been a bit better. And there were one or two other little things, like we mentioned about where Bond saying about the sailor and helping out the others. There were one or two little instances, but literally that'd be it. Everything else I think was right on the money. I definitely recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it yet, and it'll be interesting to hear what our JBR listeners think as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, for me, I think this is bang up there. Like I think it's my favourite continuation novel. For me, it is like Fleming wrote this. Like as far as I'm concerned, the character of Bond, the plot, everything just drips Ian Fleming, and I feel like if it had come out that Fleming had written this book years before and it had come out under a different name, I'd believe him. I think he's done that good a job of getting Fleming's Bond. Interesting that he kind of plays away from the movies and almost has a reaction against that with the gadgets and stuff, or the lack of gadgets, I should say, but still kind of puts them in there, which I think is great. Yeah, I think this book is brilliant. I really do. I highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't read it, or if you have, read it again and re-experience it for another time because it's bloody good. So I suppose it begs the question: do you think Colonel Sun would have made a good Bond film?
I think it would, in the equivalent that Casino Royale made a good Bond film, in the fact that the story was utilised, but I think the book, there's not enough in that book for a whole film. I think you definitely need to put stuff around it. But if you followed it to the T, would it make a good Bond film? I think the characters are amazing. I think Colonel Sun could definitely be in his own Bond film. I think Ariadne could definitely be in her own Bond film. I think it would need a bit of padding out in the middle. I think, but I think the opening and the end are both really, really good. The opening and the end are both brilliant.
In this sense, I think, like, for example, when you look at the Casino Royale book, they said it was unfilmable for years, didn't they? Because it was so sort of short, and it was shorter than the others, but it was essentially Bond goes to France, goes to a casino, they have the game, then there's the little tussle at the end, and that's it.
Yeah.
And the way they filled that out in the film with the whole, Skyfleet stuff and all that, I think was great, and Miami Airport and all those kind of business. With this, like, there are some real kind of cool set pieces, like in the sense that you've got the scene with M at the beginning. That's like the perfect pre-title sequence as far as I'm concerned. Do you know what I mean? I see that as like, Bond starts off at the golf course on his way to see M. There's the tussle. He jumps out the window, all messed up, falls into the long grass, and that would be the dissolve into the title sequence. Do you know what I mean?
That'd be awesome. Yeah. That would be awesome. That would be really
And then
good.
there'd be like a really trippy title sequence with Bond seeing all sorts of crazy shit.
Yeah.
And then the other sequences, you've got, like, the fight with the two thugs with Ariadne. You've got the shootout at the safe house. You've got traveling along the water. You've got the brilliant scene with the boat. And then, of course, you've got the torture scene, and then the kind of big fight in the house at the end. I reckon there's enough for a film in there. You'd have to pad it out a bit.
And the sort of bit where he's scaling the sort of slope to get observing their house, Colonel's house, and then scoping that out. And that could definitely be sort of expanded on. No, I think you're right. I think there is quite a lot of material there. I still think there need to be a little bit of other story in there somewhere. But if not, and if it wasn't made, I think there is a hell of a lot in there that could definitely be used for future Bond films if they were so inclined.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's almost like they look at the continuation novels as being a little bit cheap and nasty, don't they? Like, the general consensus with people, it's like, oh, it's not Fleming, it's just some other guy ripping it off.
Yeah.
But with this one, it's such a shining example of what you can achieve with a writer who really gets it. It's such a shame. I would love them to make a movie out of this. Like, if they did, who would play Bond? Like, if this film had been made at some point in the history of the Bond universe, where do you think it would have come? Who would have been Bond?
Okay, so we're talking 68. I think, do you know what? Pure Eyes Only kind of is around that right sort of time, because Bond's gone quite fantastic. They want to bring it down to earth. I'm not just saying that because of the Greece setting, but I think that sort of year would be the right sort of year that they think about it in relation to the other Bond films that have come before. I think that's the sort of time that it would set in. But then Roger Moore playing it, I'm not sure. I think there's I'm not sure whether it'd be. I'd kind of picture someone else as opposed to one of the current or one of the previous Bonds.
For me, I'm in two minds. I definitely lean towards one rather than the other. For me, this is such like an old school Bond story. It feels like a Dr. No or something like that. So I can see, Sean in his sort of like baby blue kind of trousers and polo top getting in the boat like he does with Quarrel in Dr. No.
But this was written in 68, so it'd be our.
So totally. You can choose whenever you want it to be.
Oh right, sorry. I thought you meant if it was actually. I thought you meant if it was actually made, like, as a Bond film.
No, you choose whatever you want, my friend.
Oh right. In fantasy, then I think Sean Connery.
I tell you what,
or Daniel Craig actually.
I tell you, I'd have that as the third George Lazenby movie. That's what I'd have.
Ooh.
I'd have On Her Majesty's. I'd have Diamonds Are Forever with George.
Yeah.
Get the whole revenge thing out of the way, and then he's in a similar position than Bond is at the beginning of Colonel Sun, where he's a bit fucked up. You know, he's not had a good few years, and then that would start the journey. I could see George doing this movie brilliantly.
There's a lot of action in it, isn't there? There's a lot of action. That's a good show, actually.
Yeah,
Shall we give him a call and see if he's up for it?
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Let's give George a call and get Colonel Sun made. There we go. Brilliant.
Yeah. Sheila can direct.
Cool stuff. Sheila James is jumping up and down now after that comment. Good stuff. So, you know what it's time for, don't you, Chris?
Go on then. What is it?
It's time for some Bond facts.
Flames, explosion, fire, Bond facts.
Very nice. So what have you got for us this week then, Chris?
So this week we have Bond fact number 1. Published in 1968 by Glidrose Productions, Colonel Sun was the first continuation James Bond novel published after the death of Ian Fleming in 1964.
Very nice.
Fun fact number 2. It was written by Robert Markham, which is a pseudonym created by Glidrose for British novelist Kingsley Amis, as we previously mentioned. Now, Glidrose had intended publishing a series of James Bond continuation novels written by different authors, all under the same pen name of Robert Markham. Now, that would have been interesting, isn't it? So there'll be like half a dozen Robert Markhams, but one would be Kingsley Amis, one would be so-and-so and so forth. Like in the last 4 continuation Bonds have all been sort of individual different people, haven't they?
Yeah.
So do you think it would have worked? I mean, obviously, Colonel Sun was the only one to do that. I wonder why that didn't.
It is an interesting one. So it's kind of like they've almost half done that these days with a different name author for every book, but they just haven't used the pseudonym. And I suppose the thing is, like we've said before, like in the publishing industry, the book publishing industry, it's the author's name that sells the book. And it's like when you go into a bookshop, it's always the author's name is written huge and then the title of the book is smaller. So I guess it makes more sense if you're having a Jeffrey Deaver write the book or a William Boyd. It makes sense to use that name rather than just a pseudonym who isn't actually a real person, you know?
That's true.
So, and there was also that one with Sebastian Fuchs where he had Sebastian Fuchs writing as Ian Fleming, which was an unusual little angle, but interesting little cover name there.
Yeah. So Bond fact number 3, according to Titan Books, Kingsley Amis approached Eon Productions with the idea of the novel being adapted as a future Bond film. But Amis was told that Harry Saltzman had blackballed any use of Colonel Sun as a Bond film, as apparently in response to Glidrose having rejected the publication of the post-Fleming Bond novel, Per Fine Ounce, which Saltzman had championed. Now, there's a lot of information there. So basically, Kingsley Amis, obviously, any author, I mean, there were reports that he didn't want it to be filmed, but, any author that's written a book, you want it filmed because obviously it's exposure, it's money, it's everything like that. So he obviously wanted it filmed, but Harry Saltzman said no because he wanted to get the material of Per Fine Ounce so he could use that for a Bond film. Now, that throws up an interesting thing. Per Fine Ounce was talked about a few years ago, again, about having some material which could be used for a Bond film. So, I mean, there's a whole other story. It wasn't a completed novel, but there was definitely, again, more places to mine information from, more nuggets that we could use.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it, if that one little event of Harry Saltzman blackballing Colonel Sun is what led to them never using any of the continuation books ever for the films. Because I think, like we mentioned, I think Colonel Sun would have made a great Bond film. And it's funny, isn't it, how I guess it's like politics, isn't it, involved in production companies and all that kind of stuff. But it'll be interesting to investigate that side of things a little bit more, actually, if we can dig up somebody who kind of is more informed about that whole process than we are. Yeah.
What do you think of Per Fine Ounce as a film title?
I think when you look at to be honest, at the moment, it doesn't scream Bond at me, but it does have one thing. If you look at the Bond titles over the years, a lot of them have that sort of element of luxury in them, diamonds, gold, all that kind of stuff. So, Per Fine Ounce is directly related to, gold talk, isn't it? or is it gold? It's gold, isn't it? It's not diamonds.
Gold. Yeah. Gold. Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's in the right ballpark. But as a title standalone, I don't know. To me, that sounds more like an old school Miss Marple, Agatha Christie sort of story than a Bond,
TV murder mystery or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be interesting to see if any of that information is used in the future, but who knows? So there we are. Bond fact number 4, there are a number of scenes in later Bond films which have been almost copied or taken from Colonel Sun, such as the Greece setting in For Your Eyes Only, the kidnap of M in The World Is Not Enough, and the character of Colonel Tan Sun Moon in Die Another Day, which is an obvious nod to the titular character. Now, the interesting one there, I think, is the kidnapping of M in The World Is Not Enough. Now, do you think that Purvis and Wade had that idea after reading Colonel Sun? Because they obviously...
Yeah, well, I mean,
what do you think?
it's a funny one, isn't it? Because they've said in interviews how they always try and get as much Fleming into the books as they can, into the films as they can. And like they were trying to get... Gala Brand into Die Another Day and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
So it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if you were hired to work on the Bond films as a writer, you would read all of the books, wouldn't you? You would.
Yeah, of course you would.
You just would. So you'd read all the Flemings for a start, and I'm sure over the years, especially as you progress through, as they're writing, it's like, well, maybe we'll give, maybe I'll give Colonel Sun a bit of a read and see if we can get any kind of ideas from that. So I suppose it's a natural thing. Whether it was directly taken from there or whether, kidnapping M is a good story hook, isn't it? So whether that was just a thought they had or they lifted it directly from the novel, I don't know. I'm sure they'd tell you they came up with it themselves. Yeah. But there we go, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Finally, Bond fact number 5. Kingsley Amis followed a tradition set by Fleming of using the names of people he knew or had met during the researches for his book. So the boat that Bond uses in the book, the Altair, was the name of the boat Amis and his wife used on holiday. Whilst the Bond girl's fictitious colleagues, Legakis and Papadogonis, were friends who helped Amis in Greece while he was there. And the doctor who treats Bond in Chapter 2 was named after Amis and Jane's own doctor. So that's quite nice, adding a little bit of sort of reality to the novel.
Yeah.
Obviously, Goldfinger was based on the architect, Goldfinger. And Fleming
Goldfinger,
used to do that a lot, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate badge of honor, isn't it? To be named in a Bond book, isn't it? As a character, that would be cool.
Yeah, that would be pretty decent. There's Bond facts for today.
So it's time to reveal the answers to our Bond trivia questions, Chris.
Indeed. So I asked you first, so I think I'll ask you again. Now, you have had a little bit of a hint of what it was from when we tried to record this first time around, from last week. So my question was, in the James Bond film series, how many colonels can you name and from what film are they from? Now, there's a lot more than you initially think. I'll give you a hand once you kind of run out. I'll give you little pointers just to see where you get on. But I'll see how you get on first. So, who can you name so far?
There is my old mate, Colonel Fedor.
Colonel Fedor, indeed.
From The Living Daylights. There is not my old mate, Colonel Moon, from Die Another Day.
Yeah.
There is Colonel... Is one of the GoldenEye pilots a colonel? Francois Bruges and Bernard Jobert. Colonel Francois Bruges, is it? Or is it? Oh, no, I think that's Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Jobert.
Lieutenant.
Yeah, no, I don't think he is.
Yeah, there is one from GoldenEye, and there's a promotion within a 9-year gap.
That would be Colonel Arumov at the beginning, who becomes General Arumov.
There we are, Arumov.
Very nice.
Yes, indeed. I like that.
And after that point, I think, unless General Gogol has ever appeared as a colonel in his earlier career, that's me stumped, I think, after that point.
Right, okay. So there are quite a few more. I mean, well done for getting those, because Fedor's good, Oromov and Moon is good. There are a few more which I came up with. So we'll go in narrative order. So there is one in From Russia with Love. Any ideas who that could be?
Colonel Klebb, of course. What a dickhead.
Yes.
Yeah,
well done,
course.
Colonel Klebb. Goldfinger. There is one in Goldfinger. Now, this is a very small part in the film, and he happens to enjoy a nice brandy.
Can't remember his name, but he's from the Bank of England. That dude.
Yeah.
It's rather
Colonel
disappointing,
Smithers.
Brandy. Colonel Smithers.
Yeah.
Of course, it's Colonel Smithers. Yeah. Overdose of Bombois.
Yeah, that's the one. And Thunderball, there's a Colonel as well. Seen early on.
Thunderball. Colonel. Seen early on.
Yeah, he likes to do what Blofeld does in Diamonds Are Forever. Dress up in drag.
Oh, that would be Colonel Jacques Bouvard.
Yes, nicely
There it
done. No, couldn't remember any between that one and Octopussy. But there is one in Octopussy I could think of. Again, a lot of them are in the pre-titles, but yeah.
That would be who he's disguised as. That's
Yes.
Colonel Toro.
Yes, wow,
Yes.
nice one. Okay. License to Kill, there's one in that, although he's not really referred to as Colonel quite a lot, but he's one of Sanchez's team.
Would that be the only one I could possibly think of? It's not Truman Lodge. It's not Benicio.
You
So is
see
it-
him in an army gear.
Is it
At
Hella?
one point. Yes, it is. Yeah,
It's the
good
last
man,
you'll see of
Colonel
Hella in your stingers.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good. Okay, now there is one in Tomorrow Never Dies as well. A female colonel, no less.
It's got to be Wylin, isn't it?
It is, yeah, Colonel Wylin. Although you don't really
Yeah.
hear it, really, do you? So, I mean, these ones are quite tough, very tough, in fact. There is one in The World Is Not Enough as well. Can you think of that guy?
Colonel.
This is-
I'm
Think
gonna
of the
need more of a
nuclear
clue.
test. Yeah, he's in the nuclear test site. This guy is. I mean, there's a minor character. It's Colonel Akeyevich. He's the one who is with Pierce when they spot Christmas Jones, and then they
Alright.
go down into the bunker. But I mean, that's
Good
a tiny
spot.
little one. Yeah, you've got obviously Die Another Day. There's only two others. There's one in Quantum of Solace, which is the Colonel of Police, but I mean that's minor. But there is
Yeah.
one in Skyfall who is a Lieutenant Colonel, and I'm sure you'll get that.
That's got to be Gareth Mallory.
Indeed,
Yeah.
it is. Excellent stuff.
Very
Well
nice.
done, man. That's brilliant.
Cool. That was a
Good
tough
Colonel
question.
knowledge. It was.
Good
It's a bit
stuff.
too tough, really, but good knowledge.
So my question of the day was: on
Yes.
which Bond poster would you find the tagline, "His bad side is a dangerous place to be"?
Now this is good because you never had a poster question before.
We haven't. No.
No, and it's kind of thrown me a bit actually. I'm from the phrase, I'm imagining that it's not going to be Diamonds Are Forever or it's got to be a dark one basically. So I'm thinking Tim, I'm thinking Danny Boy. Now, if I'm thinking Tim, I'm thinking License to Kill. If I'm thinking Danny Boy, I don't think it'd be Skyfall. I'm thinking either Casino or Quantum. But I'm feeling a little bit stronger with Tim. So I'm going to try for License to Kill.
Well, Chris, you're absolutely right. Ding, ding,
That's
ding.
it? Oh,
There
that
you
was
go.
a good question. That
Thank
was
you.
a tough question as well.
That was a tough
like
one.
it.
Well done for getting it. I
Yeah.
suppose what you did is you broke it down in logical steps, didn't you? His bad
Tried
side
to,
is a bad place to be, or whatever. So it's like it's going to be one where Bond's in a bit of a bad mood. So it'd either be Quantum
Yeah.
because he's in a bad
Yeah.
mood. It's going to be License to Kill
Yeah.
because he's in a bad mood. You
Yeah.
know,
Those were the
Uh,
two that I
yeah.
could think of. But yeah.
Good stuff.
Oh, great
Excellent
question.
work.
Cool.
So that takes us
So-
on to the next step of the ultimate James Bond quiz show. That is the end of every episode, which is the Guess the Quote round.
Bond, 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 Bond. James Bond.
Very good. Excellent
Okay.
work.
With the T-shirt as well.
With the T-shirt, indeed. So
Yeah.
it was my quote last time,
Oh,
which
yeah, it
I'm
was
going
your
to
quote,
perform
wasn't it?
for you again now.
What was
And
it?
I'm
I've
not
forgotten.
that confident in the delivery of it, but I'm
Right,
going to just go
okay.
for it anyway.
Okay, here we go. Sorry.
Give me some spare clips.
I like it.
I can't get the voice right. I can actually do this dude's voice, but I can't get it properly. But anyway,
Can
I'm
you
going to
do it
one
one more time? Yeah.
Give me some spare clips.
Give me some spare clips. It's good. No, it is good. It is good. I can picture the scene, and I know exactly what film it is, and I know what scene it is. Now, there's two people in the scene, and I'm thinking it's either one or the other.
All right.
But the way that you said it, it sounds definitely more like the person I think it was initially, and that was A View to a Kill in the underground mine scene, and a certain Mr. Max Zorin asking Scarpine for some clips so he can gun the
Very
miners.
nice. There you go. You got it
So
in
right,
one.
that
Well
one.
done. Absolutely.
Well, see, your delivery wasn't as bad as you thought it was.
But Christopher Walken is usually like more of like, hey, give me some more spare clips. Like, but I should have just done it like that.
That's brilliant. Yeah, definitely.
There we go.
No, that was good because he doesn't actually say that line quite Christopher Walken.
No, he doesn't. It's more deadpan, isn't
No.
it? Yeah.
Give me some clips. Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, so on to my new quote for this week. You'll be pleased to know that it's not foreign language. I'm back to the mother tongue. Oh, good. But it's equally as bad, I think. Right. Okay, so my quote for this podcast is, oh, God, wait a minute. Okay. Sorry. Okay, here it is. He'd do anything for me, and I'd do anything for you.
That was beautiful. That was my favourite ones are either when you do it in a foreign accent and in a foreign language, and you don't have any clue what you're actually saying, but you're getting you've had two of those so far, and they've been brilliant. And the other one is when you do women. I love it. I love the way your voice comes across all dainty and sweet and high pitched. I think it's very well done. And I think,
how do you know that was a woman?
Well, I suppose I don't. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I don't. But I think I've got a strong idea of who that is. Let's hear it one more time for the benefit of our listeners.
Okay, one more time. Here we go. He'd do anything for me, and I'd do anything for you.
Yeah,
I think the first delivery was actually better than that one. But anyway,
I think I know who that is.
You got
stuff.
it. Okay,
excellent work. We'll obviously reveal the answer to that in the next episode, so be sure to tune in for that.
Have we got any listener quotes?
We certainly do. So last time we had a quote from JBR listener John Wilson, so we'll just play that for you again now.
I'm terminating your employment. You will leave immediately. Okay,
so did you get that one, Chris?
It took me a while, actually, that one. I think, well, I've got a very strong feeling who I think it is now, but upon listening to it initially, it took me a little while to think about it, but I think I've got a good idea of who it is now.
My mind went to M in License to Kill when Bond, but I know he doesn't say it like that, so that wasn't it. So let's find out who it was.
Hi guys, it's John Wilson, just getting back to you following the quote I left last week. I'm surprised you didn't get this one. I thought it was fairly easy compared to some that have been sent in the past. But anyway, mine was said by Mr. Hugo Drax in Moonraker. He's terminating the employment of the lovely Miss Corinne Dufour just before he feeds her to the dogs. The bastard. Anyway, glad that stumped a few of you. Take it easy and all the best. Bye-bye.
So there we have it, Mr. Hugo Drax. Lovely stuff.
Good
and there it
Hugo.
is, just before he releases the hounds, and we have that section, which is a really dark little section, that isn't it? It's for a Roger film. It's pretty dark.
Yeah. And particularly for Moonraker, which is obviously quite like hearted in places. Yeah. And that I love that scene. I really do like that scene. It's cool.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's good.
So thank you for that, John. Lovely to hear from you. Now we have a quote here from Mr. Jed Yong, all the way from Singapore. So let's play that for you now.
Hi, this is Jed Yong from Singapore, and I'm answering the call for Guess the Code entries. So here's my code. Food is also very important. I think that might have been too easy, but there it is anyway. Thanks as always for the wonderful podcast. See you guys.
Okay, have you got that one then, Chris?
I don't know. I've got an idea of what I think it is, and if it is, then I'll be super happy, because this one is a tough one. This is probably one of the toughest quotes we've had, I think.
I've got to be honest. This one's got me. I'm not sure about this one at all. Yeah.
No, I've got an idea, but if it, I'm not. Sometimes you just know it, don't you? And it's bang and it's down. This one, I've got an idea, and I'll be super happy if I get it. But equally, if I didn't get it, that wouldn't surprise me, because it is a toughie.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing that one next time round.
Good stuff. Well, thank you for that one, Jed. A very good quote that you've posed to us there. Thank you for that. So, moving on to the next round, it is time for Guess the Music Cue.
Love that. I love that. That's my favourite intro, I think.
Very nice.
So good. So, Guess the Music Cue. So, basically, we'll play the one from last week, from last time, and we'll see if you got it right. So here is the music cue from last time. Okay, so there we are. What did you think of that one, Mr. Thomas Ears?
I think I've got that one. I think it's a reasonably obvious one, I think.
You knew it was...
I knew it was a John Bazza. I knew it was an older film. Right. So I feel, so I'm gonna put it out there, and I reckon it is the opening part of From Russia with Love, stalking around the garden.
Superb, Mr. Bond. Superb, Mr. Bond. Superb.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a bit, obviously, well, exactly as you mentioned. Yeah, so basically Grant's stalking Bond, and it's just a subtle little bit early on in that stalking moment, and I love it. It's a great piece of music and a great scene that as well. Okay, so on to the music cue for this week's podcast, and here it is. So what did you think of that one? And
that one, I'm fairly certain I've got that one straight out of the gate. That's a good one though. I like it. I'm liking these classic ones. It's nice.
Yeah, it is certainly a classic, and I love the way that all it takes is a couple of notes from Barry, of notes, and it transports you there, and he's a master at doing that, and that's why I love these rounds so much. So anyone who's listening, if you've got an idea for that Guess the Music Cue, you message in or leave us a voicemail, and we'll let you know, or at least you'll find out next time if you're right.
Good stuff.
There we are.
Absolutely. So the next round in the James Bond quiz show is Complete
the
Lyric
Section. Yeah.
I just feel like all of these sections need an explosion at the end, you know?
I know, they do now, yeah.
They all
apart from Guess the Music Cue, because that's so good as it is.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so it was your lyric last time, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Okay, so I'm going to go straight in. Now, do you want me to deadpan it first and then do it song-wise afterwards, or just go straight for song and mix it up so I'm not singing the actual tune?
I feel what we should do is we should have a deadpan, and then when you reveal the answer, if I need a clue, then maybe you do the performance.
Right, okay.
Which may or may not bring me closer.
In my case, it wouldn't. But anyway, okay. So, here is my lyric from last time. I'll deadpan it. I've seen places, faces, and smiled for a moment.
But oh, you won't haunt me so.
Oh, that's pretty much it.
Or you can't.
No, you.
Oh. But oh.
What did you say? Say your answer again.
But oh, you won't haunt me so.
Oh.
If I got
it no, you're pretty much there. You are pretty much there. It's but oh, you. 2 syllables, me so.
Oh, I don't know. Go on then.
Haunted. So it's. I'll sing it and then you sing it. So it's I've seen place. No, sorry, I can't do that. I don't know what I was about to do then. I had no
please
idea.
Let's make a James Bond tribute album with you taking lead vocals, please.
I tell you what, I'll be the new singer for Cue the Music with Warren Winger. He'll love it.
I'm sure he'll be banging down your door immediately if you said that.
So the answer is, but oh, you haunted me so. But I'm going to give that to you because
yes.
But no, I'm going to give that to you because you're basically there. And it's it's a tricky one in the sense that there's a couple of lines which roll off the tongue quite easily from that lyric, isn't there? Because there is, I've seen places, faces, and smiled for a moment. And then there's a couple of others within that song that you think, oh, that might fit there. So from that aspect, it was quite tricky. But no, you definitely nailed that one. So nicely done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And now it's your turn to grill me. Go for it.
So obviously my last Complete the Lyrics section that I performed was just borderline impossible. I was just trying to catch you out. So I'm going to give you a more reasonable one this time.
Right. Okay.
And that goes like this.
Yes.
Lurking in some darkened doorway or crouched on a rooftop somewhere.
Ooh. I like that. Because it's ringing bells, but it's not definite. It's ringing bells.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I think out of all the songs, this is the one that has the potential for getting lyrics wrong more than any other.
Yes.
In the way they're delivered, it's like, what is that? What is that bit? It's difficult.
Can you say that? Are you allowed to say that one more time?
I am allowed, I'm allowed. Lurking in some darkened doorway or crouched on a rooftop somewhere.
Cool.
There we go.
Good.
And there were some darkened doorways in Colonel Sun, weren't they, in that little sequence after the safe house?
They were indeed, yeah.
Very nice. Cool. So we'll obviously reveal the answer to that next time. To round out today's episode, we've got Bond Celebrity Deathmatch, where we take Chris's pack of Bond top trumps. We draw 2 cards at random and then muse on how those 2 people would fare in a fight with each other. So let's see what you got. So let's do some flipping and some skipping.
I'll do a little bit of card shuffling first, and then we'll see how we go. Okay, so are you ready? So you're going to call, and I'll stop and take the card out. So I'm starting now.
Stop.
Okay, so that's the first one. I'll just cut the pack a couple of times. Okay, I'm going to start now.
Stop.
Okay. Right, so our Bond Celebrity Top Trump Deathmatch for this podcast is... great one to start with. Ooh. We have Francisco Scaramanga with a golden gun. Now, if anyone's got a chance of beating him, it's going to be tough because he's a good one, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's obviously
he only needs one
very,
shot.
very tricky one. He does. He only needs one shot. Now, his opponent is going to be, oh my goodness. Wow. Baron Samedi of Live and Let Die.
Okay.
Now this is hard, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So that's
a golden gun and Baron Samedi.
That's a good payoff.
How are we gonna do? Yeah. How are we gonna do this?
Okay. So I think what we have to do is we have to look at the 2 characters and the resources and the skills they have.
Right.
Scaramanga has his island. He's got Knick-Knack.
He does.
He's got his golden gun and Kra. He's got his golden gun, which only carries 1 bullet.
Yep.
But he does have his exceptional skill as a hitman, and he's an amazing shot.
He is.
What makes this difficult is we've seen Baron Samedi get shot in the head in the film, and it doesn't seem to bother him that much, does it?
He's still laughing. He's still having a good time. And we've seen him bitten by snakes, and yet he's still around and laughing and sitting on train.
In fact, he is really the only sort of villain who's still alive at the end. And still laughing. So I feel like I'm swaying towards Baron Samedi on this one.
Do you know what? If there was any other person in this pack, aside from perhaps a Bond, you'd almost have to give it to Scaramanga because, he's got this gun ready. He can shoot anyone and absolutely, he would be top of the list, basically, wouldn't he? You against the previous ones who we've had against Largo, you'd probably pick Scaramanga because he's got the gun. Yeah. Against who else? I can't remember who he had last time. But basically, he would be one of the best choices. But Samedi, the man who does not die, the man with voodoo and magic power. Yeah,
I mean, like in the previous ones we did with, it was Bond versus Largo. Then we kind of we knew how that pans out. Zorin and Goldfinger we had. Both of those were foiled by Bond. There was a tricky one between the 2 of them. But with this one, not even Bond killed somebody. So
no,
I feel like this has got to go to Baron Samedi, to be honest with you. I
Do
mean,
you know what? I no, I completely agree. As much as I love Scaramanga, as much as I think, basically, if I was playing top trumps for real and I'd Scaramanga in my hand, I'd think, fucking yes, this guy's sorted. Yeah. But Baron Samedi, I agree. I think he's got to trump him because it's a beautiful day. Yes, sir.
It's a beautiful day. Yeah.
And I think,
nice.
No, I think he just can't, like you said, he can't be killed. So I think Baron Samedi takes it.
There we go. Ding, ding, ding. Baron Samedi is the winner. So do you know what I think we should do is once we've got through all of the top trumps, we should have a winners championship and pose all the winners against each other until we find the ultimate.
Yeah, okay, I keep going. Yeah, man. That's a brilliant idea. Fantastic idea. I like that. So well done to Baron Samedi.
Well done to Baron Samedi, the champion Bond Celebrity Deathmatch of the week. Well done to him. Yeah, lovely stuff. So that about rounds out today's episode, the review of Colonel Sun. Now, I suppose what we will do is we will keep a little bit stum about the next episode and do our little hint of it on the social media on next Friday. So if you want a little hint about what we're going to be talking about, then make sure you come and follow us and like us and all that kind of stuff.
Indeed. And we will drop the hint on Facebook and check it out. We'll make sure it's a tricky one.
Absolutely. So if you haven't read Colonel Sun yet, make sure you go and grab yourself a copy and have a read. If you were, in fact, I got my copy here. Lovely stuff. If you perhaps read it before in the past and didn't like it, I saw a couple of those comments on Facebook saying, I didn't really like it. Revisit it because I thoroughly recommend it. You thoroughly recommend it. And I think perhaps seeing it with fresh eyes will make you deem it a little bit better than you perhaps thought it was. Yeah,
I think ultimately what makes that book great is the character of Sun himself. I think he's brilliant. Obviously, we mentioned this in the review, but the fact that he was just so... He was really well written, wasn't he? And that whole torture thing is incredibly memorable. Yeah. And I think because of that makes the book, onto that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. A great book all round. I stick that up there as my favourite Bond continuation novel, I think. I really like Solo as well, like we said before, but I don't know. For me, it's right up there. But there you go. So let us know what you think of Colonel. I keep wanting to say Casino Royale. Colonel Sun. Let us know what you think of that on the social medias. And there we go. So until next time, James Bond Radio will return. My name's Tom Sears.
My name's Chris Wright.
And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.